Good evening. It is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023 at 5:31 p.m. and we are calling this regular meeting of the Wake County Board of Education to order. I would like to welcome those of you that are watching at home and those that are here in person to observe as the Board of Education conducts its official business. Wake County Board of Education meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the official business of the school system. The public is cordially invited to attend board meetings to observe the board as it conducts its official business. Persons who willfully interrupt, disrupt, or cause disturbances at an official meeting may be directed to leave by the presiding officer. Members of the audience should show respect for our speakers by refraining from loud comments or other disruptions. Disruptions by any person or persons of a public meeting will be subject to action in accordance to General Statute 143-318.17. All 9 board members are with us today, along with our superintendent and our board attorney. If you all would join me in standing and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now begin our information items and begin with the superintendent's comments. Ms. Moore.
Good evening. Congratulations are in order for the 10 finalists for the 22-23 WCPSS Teacher of the Year. I had the honor of surprising each one of these finalists with the good news on March 28th. They are Jane Ferguson, an ESL teacher at Brooks Magnet Elementary; Terry Hennings, a civic literacy and African American studies teacher at Garner Magnet High; Sarah Freeman, an English teacher at Wake Forest High; Leroy Salazar, a Spanish teacher at Wake Early College of Information and Biotechnologies; Caitlin Putt, an ELA teacher at Carroll Magnet Middle; Tyler Elzie, a 3rd grade teacher at Buckhorn Creek Elementary; Darius Davis, a special education teacher at Washington Magnet Elementary; Ross Anderson, a social studies teacher at Moore Square Magnet Middle; Jeannie Clayton, an ESL teacher at Cary High; and Chris Stapleton, an English teacher at Apex Friendship High. We are blessed with thousands of talented teachers in the Wake County Public School System, and these finalists represent the best of the best. They will appear before an interview committee which will select our Teacher of the Year. The winner will be named at a special celebration on April 27th. Congratulations to all of these outstanding educators. Congratulations are also in order for 3 staff members who were recently honored for exceptional service to our students. First, Jacqueline Fuentes, a school social worker at Lincoln Heights Magnet Elementary, was named the WCPSS School Social Worker of the Year. She has been a school social worker for 11 years and has played an active role in her school, serving on school improvement teams and other groups that support the social, emotional, physical, behavioral, and well-being needs of students. Lincoln Heights Principal Scott Gayton says she tirelessly investigates all avenues to find any and all resources for our families in need. She will attend appointments with our families, find medical resources, connect families to providers, and the list goes on. Next, congratulations to Angelica Smith, known as Angel, who was named the WCPSS School Library Media Coordinator of the Year. She is the School Library Media Coordinator at North Wake College and Career Academy. Ms. Smith enjoys being a part of her students' academic journeys from the moment they first enter school until they graduate. She says, I can talk to them as individuals, not just as students, find out their passions and interests. With this in mind, I can tailor the library's program to meet their needs. I cultivate relationships based on trust and respect, and students see me as a partner and an ally in their learning. We also recently named Barnan Creech of Zebulon Magnet Middle School as the WCPSS CTE Career Technical Education Teacher of the Year. Ms. Creech teaches family and consumer science, health science, and exploring trades courses and provides many career development opportunities and experiences for the students. She takes students out of the classroom on a regular basis to interact with community leaders, businesses, college campuses, guest speakers, and organizations. Our goal as a district is to do all that we can to give students what they need to be successful, both inside and outside of the classroom. Each of these employees were honored for the many ways they meet students where they are to give them the best support possible. Congratulations to all on these well-deserved recognitions. Finally, I would like to invite all families to participate in the annual WCPSS Family Survey, which they can complete now through May 12th. The survey will include questions about family engagement in schools, barriers to engagement, school climate, and more. We will use this information to improve the way that we connect with families, to better address their needs, to improve the overall school experience. So I invite families to help us make each child's educational experience as positive and beneficial as possible by giving honest, thoughtful, and thorough responses. You can learn more and find a link to the survey at wcpss.net/family survey. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore. And not to survey everybody out, but we do still have the superintendent search survey that is live until the 18th. We encourage everybody to take the time to fill that out as well. Both are very important in providing feedback to our district and to our board as we move forward. I want to first highlight that it is Assistant Principal Week. Thank you to the Cary Chamber for having an Assistant Principal's Luncheon this afternoon, where some of our APs, not all, in the Cary area were able to sit down and enjoy a lunch in a nice, quiet environment. And thank you also to the YMCA of Cary for sponsoring that. Very thankful to see and excited to see that the Holly Springs High School Optimus Prime robotics team are our state robotics champs, and they are going to nationals. If you've never been to a FIRST robotics program, I highly recommend it. I know this is a growing part of our community, and many, many more of our schools are adding it, and it's just a really neat experience for so many of our students. Last week was School Librarian Week. Many of them had the week off, so I thought that was pretty nice. But many thanks to our school librarians for the work that they do to help our students find that book that'll keep them being a reader and keep them excited about reading as they move forward in their life. Before spring break, I was able to go see the Apex Friendship High School musical Anastasia. I don't know how they did it, but they had a full train car on stage that rotated 360 degrees. Our theater folks are absolutely incredible. Green Level High School will be doing Once Upon a Mattress, April 14th and 15th. They have 3 shows. And towards the end of April, keep a lookout for Holly Springs High School performing SpongeBob SquarePants, the musical. It is also still Ramadan and also Arab Heritage Month. Schools have been provided resources on how to support their students and celebrate this month. It's also Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, which is very near and dear to my heart. This morning, we got to celebrate a new school in our district that has been open since July. I want to send a lot of thanks out to Herbert Akins Road Middle School. They had a great student ambassador team. Their jazz band had performances. Their school choral harmonics group sang, and they had 2 young men who performed a guitar duet. They had students speak honestly about their experience. I especially appreciated the 8th grader who said, "I didn't want to come here, but now I love it. And I'm telling all of my neighborhood friends that they're going to love it too." Starting a new school is a difficult thing, and I think that really encapsulated a lot of experiences for many of our students, and I appreciate them speaking and sharing their experiences and being honest about it. And Ms. Adkins, her team, the Nighthawk PTA, and their students have worked really hard this past year to create and cultivate a rich learning environment for students. We saw multiple clubs that they have during the week, and I just want to thank our voters and our Board of Commissioners for their support of our school construction program. Because of you, we're able to have these places for our students. And that concludes my comments, so I'll pass it over to our Vice Chair, Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey. Good afternoon. Is it evening now? It seems like it's been a long day. So it may not surprise you then to learn that April is also Stress Awareness Month and Alcohol Awareness Month. Not saying those two are combined, but please do take care of your mental health. I will keep it short. I do want to thank the Cary Chamber for their recognition events that they have done for our principals and our assistant principals out in the Cary area. It's nice to see, again, the hard work that our building administrators do, recognized by people in the community outside of our schools. I want to thank the folks that came out to the community meeting we had at Parkside Elementary regarding the new Parkside Middle School that's being built. The student assignment staff did a fantastic job collecting feedback about school calendars, assignment areas, and then the timeline for the project. There's a lot of excitement in the area for the new middle school, and as you know, that's an area where a lot of our middle schools are really crowded, and so this school will be well received. I'm not going to go too far into it because we'll have some budget information later and budget discussion at later meetings. But one of the concerns that I want to draw to everybody's attention, if you have seen it, as you know, we are heavily influenced by the funding we get from the state. And our two-chamber legislature has adopted a House budget that does contain a provision in it that didn't necessarily get a lot of attention, but it's in regard to class size and class size limits. So what the legislation does is, you know, right now we have limits on the number of students you can have in a classroom, kindergarten through third grade. And and what that does is that then if you only have a set number of classrooms in a building and you have to spread out those kindergarten through third graders, you put an awful lot of kids into fourth grade and an awful lot of kids into fifth grade. And that could put a lot of stress on your fourth and fifth grade teachers, and those fourth and fifth graders may feel they don't get enough individual attention. So the solution to this was, rather than repeal those limits or maybe take them from 16, 17 kids to maybe 20, 22 kids, was to put limits then on the fourth and fifth grade classrooms. So now we need more classrooms than we have available within the school buildings. It's not an ideological issue. It's not even an educational issue as much as it's just a simple math issue. Geometry and spatial relations. How many classrooms do you have in a building? How many students can you divide up among them? And the impacts from this in a district like Wake County are going to be huge. You know, it can lead to potential reassignments. It can lead to potential calendar changes. It can put even more strain on our capital budgets. This is something that I think the legislature did with good intentions, right? I think there was concern about the fourth and fifth graders, but without looking ahead to what the practical impacts will be, this could have a really severe fiscal impact on our school system. It could destabilize a lot of families and their assignment areas, and there's just a lot of drawbacks to it. And whether or not this can be changed somehow, whether or not this could be drawn out to give us at least a runway to transition people over time so it's not an immediate impact, or whether there's some way that more waivers could be granted. I hope everyone who's concerned about this will reach out to state lawmakers, make sure they're aware of these impacts. Even if you have to draw little boxes of classrooms and students and show that, you know what, you run out of boxes before you run out of students, just the harmful impacts this will have. So thank you for letting me talk about that issue.
Thank you so much. Ms. Waters.
Thank you, Chairman Haffey. As we've already said, April is an important month to celebrate many things, including volunteerism. It is Global Volunteer Month, and I want to say a special thank you to all who volunteer within our schools to help our students and our educators in so many ways. I would also like to highlight an organization that I recently volunteered with that is having a positive impact on the lives of students in Wake County. Note in the Pocket helps ensure that children have the attire needed to attend school. Their motto is clothing children with dignity and love. They work closely with our school social workers to get clothing to our children all over Wake County. It is a great place to volunteer and a great place to donate new and gently used shoes and clothing of all sizes from infant to adult. And as Chairman Haffey said, April is also World Autism Month. And I'd like to read something that I read from UNC Teach. It says, "This is the month we celebrate the unique strengths, perspectives, and success of autistic individuals worldwide. And if you have been blessed to know and love someone with ASD or Asperger's, it is truly a gift." April 18th, as a reminder, is the date for a special call Board of Education meeting. This is a public input session for the superintendent search process. It will be held at Southeast Raleigh High School and will begin at 6:30 p.m. So I hope if your schedule permits, you will come out and help us by providing feedback on what you would like to see as we continue on the search process. And then finally, I'd like to announce the next District 4 BAC meeting. It will be on May 15th at Southeast Raleigh Elementary. The meeting will begin at 6 p.m. and will provide an update on the superintendent search process, and we will also get an update on equity. So thank you, and I look forward to great things coming up in District 4, lots of activities and events coming up soon. So thank you.
Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. April is School Library Month. I want to thank all of our school librarians for their work and their professionalism. You are valued and appreciated. Since our last meeting, I've continued to visit schools in District 5, including the Dillard Magnet School campuses. I attended Athens Drive High School's production of Seussical, the musical. And just before spring break, I had the pleasure of attending a performance by the North Carolina Symphony with more than 1,000 of our fourth graders. Next week, I'll be at Middle Creek High School for their production of James and the Giant Peach. The arts are thriving in Wake County Public Schools, and I'm honored to support the hard work of all the students and staff involved in the arts. And I'm grateful to our community partners that help bring the arts to our students. In regard to our search for our next superintendent, I want to remind everyone, as Ms. Mahaffey said, about the online survey that's still open through April 18th. And there are several in-person comment opportunities next week, in addition to the one on the 18th. Right, the 18th on Tuesday. On Sunday, the 16th at 3 p.m., I'm hosting a public input session. Again, that's Sunday at 3 p.m. On the superintendent search, and that will be at Powell Drive Community Park on Powell Drive in Raleigh. It's indoors, rain or shine, and open to anyone in or outside of District 5. Second, on Monday, April 17th, I'm hosting my second BAC meeting at Middle Creek Elementary School. That meeting is at 5:30 p.m., and part of the agenda, we will do budget, and then the other part will be input on the superintendent search. And finally, I want to thank Superintendent Moore and staff for all of your work on the budget proposal that will be presented tonight. Budgets are an expression of values, and I look forward to doing the work necessary to secure the funding that our students and staff need to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ng.
Good evening, and hope you guys had a great spring break. The one thing that is still on my mind is the issue of gun safety, and I, ultimately do want to see kind of where we stand as a school district in terms of our position on gun safety, and specifically what we talked about in the previous meetings about from the Be Safe to talk about the safe storage of guns. All these things that are still happening in our society. I just want to make sure that we take a stance on that. And just also bear in mind that in the proposed House budget that there is a $40 million, included in that is a $40 million for school safety grants, and I would really strongly urge people to call your representatives, your senators, to just really push for that aspect of it, so that we can have safer schools. I am going to be visiting Wildwood Forest Elementary as well as Fox Row Elementary School this week, and at the end of the week I'm going to go visit Wakefield High School. So I'm going to have to wear my different hats. I'm going to have to learn some lingo for talking to high school students. And then next week we're going to have our BAC meeting, joint BAC meeting with Mrs. Caulfield in District 1 over at Heritage High School at 6 p.m. on April 17th. And there will be elections, but the major agenda will be to discuss getting feedback about the superintendent search. and kind of the characteristics of a superintendent that the people are looking for. A person that perhaps would best fulfill our the role of the superintendent and to meet your needs and to have the same priorities as you do. So I'd like to get some of that feedback on this coming Monday. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. April is also Occupational Therapy Month, as I was informed by our OTs that are here today. I want to first thank everybody who's come today to this meeting, everyone who has signed up to speak. I appreciate the time that you are taking out of your lives to be here. So thank you all, everybody in this room, for coming. I'm going to raise awareness about one issue that is in the North Carolina General Assembly, and that is there are some bills that are attempting to strip power from the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. Wake County and our state, we have some excellent athletic programs. The NCHSAA is not perfect, but a couple of years ago they came to agreements with DPI to fix a couple of perceived problems. Everything has been fine. The changes would put the entire athletic association or our entire athletics in the hands of the state board. Yes, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Basically, what I'm getting to is what we have works really well. It is respected around the country. They set eligibility requirements returning from concussions. We have a lot of well-run state tournaments, the football games, everything they put on. We do a great job. Oftentimes, our state will be where we try out new rules in athletic events, and I say this speaking from experience as an official. We do it, and then the other 49 states then adopt what we have done. They do that because we have a high-quality organization, and we have high-quality athletics, athletic directors, coaches, student athletes. And so I encourage you to reach out to representatives. This is not political. We should not make athletics political. We should keep things the way they are. They are not broken. And I just want to voice my support for our North Carolina High School Athletic Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you. So April is a busy month, and I was like, I should go last because mine are downers. Many of you know I've spent my entire professional career in anti-violence against women and children, our most vulnerable. And April is also Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And at least 1 in 4 of our children are sexually assaulted before the age of 18 for girls, and 1 in 12 before the age of 12 for boys. So our educators and certainly our social workers know the students in their buildings who are impacted. And I certainly, each year, I'm very fortunate that most of our social workers and our staff know what I do for a living, and each year I have an amazing social worker who goes above and beyond to ensure that a student that they suspect this is happening, to ensure they're providing accommodations in our buildings so that those kids can manage the trauma that they're experiencing while they still are attending our school. So while it is definitely not an exciting month that we wish we, and I certainly wish we did not have to acknowledge, but given the number of people that it impacts, we do. So if you see blue pinwheels, especially in the town of Fuquay, thank you to one of our great constituents who's ensured that there are blue pinwheels throughout Fuquay to draw attention and awareness to it, but also we're putting information in their community at their request that speaks to red flags and prevention. And the thing that I would say that some of you know my story that drew me to this is graduating by the age of 18 is considered a protective factor for our children. Wake County Public Schools, specifically Project Enlightenment, and our Office of Early Childhood Learning has done a great deal of work with parents, which is also how we create protective environments. But guess what else is a protective factor for our children? is one adult outside of their family that they can trust. And I guarantee you, for the thousands of kids and families I've worked with, it is almost always an educator is the person that they trust and that they can disclose to. We thank our educators and our social workers and our school psychologists and our school counselors all the time, but especially this month for those of you who, in the midst of teaching, also have to be that support person for our students. And so I certainly know that I thank you, but I also know that those students will forever remember you, because navigating that level of trauma, especially for our younger students, is quite difficult. And today, my morning was spent with a colleague looking at the data with Department of Health and Human Services, and not a surprise to any of us, we did quite a bit of media during COVID, but now the number of reports post-COVID have gone through the roof, and we anticipated it, but it's still really hard to hear the level of egregious cases. And speaking of things that impact schools, today we're discussed looking at putting torture laws on the books for children. A child with special needs was held captive in North Carolina for 6 months and was required to communicate with their family that they were safe by the person that was holding them captive. And so, sadly enough, my morning was spent with how do we create state laws to hold people accountable when they cause harm to children. And I certainly said in that space that, well, the one place that most of our kids, if nowhere else, feel safe is their school buildings. And so certainly while we're introducing those bills on behalf of children, we're certainly also speaking to the need for the adults in the building, because that is the primary protective factor for keeping our kids safe, is those folks in our building, to ensure that we are also taking care of them while they are taking care of our most vulnerable and traumatized families. So fortunately, all of my colleagues agree that our public schools are essential to the work that we do to provide support and preventative measures for students and families who've been impacted by such tragedy and trauma. So thank you very much for the work that you all do. And I see lots of heads nodding, because I know that means that you've been touched by this with many of your students. And I never fail to mention that those of us who are adults have also been touched by this personally, and what this means for the work that you're doing on behalf of your students. So thank you all very much for the work that you do. And then in good news, we are officially back from COVID. One of my favorite schools I used to always talk about, Ballantyne Elementary, very small. Well, actually, they're growing this year. I went to see the Fireflies, and their first Lego League is back up and running. And I got to see 3 of my favorite volunteers. Actually, Lincoln Heights, pre-COVID, also had a couple of retired volunteers. I don't know if they've returned, but when I was at Ballantyne, I got to see all 3 of my grandfathers who, by grandfathers, I mean they had children who went to that school, grandchildren. Those grandchildren are no longer at that school, and they are still volunteering every day to ensure that the robotics team is back up and running at Ballantyne. So it was great to see our Fireflies, and while I was in Fuquay, I went to see our sea turtles. There's a theme here. The principal that was at Ballantyne is now at South Lakes, and she is all about their school mascots. And so I got to hear how they are using, supportive services and SEL, which they have every day in all of their classes. At South Lakes, they're the only elementary who have SEL built into every day of their school day for their students. So I got to experience that with our young people, and their acronym is SWIM, so that kids, because they're sea turtles, and I promised I would do the sea turtle, so that they can remember how they can take care of themselves throughout the day. So it was definitely exciting to swim with the sea turtles. And then lastly, I will note that many of our schools go through RAMP, which we've talked about before, which is a designation that schools can receive for their school counselors. And this year, we have only one. Actually, we have 2 schools, only one in my district that are being recognized, and that's Willow Spring Elementary will be recognized this summer in Philadelphia at the National RAMP Conference. And again, I'm always excited, and for all of our new board members, I think I've said this to you before, it is probably one of the most enlightening processes to go through with your school, to hear what they are doing in their buildings to support their students with the minimal resources that they do have. So hopefully you'll all get a chance to go through a RAMP process, but congratulations, Willow Springs Elementary.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Mr. Swanson.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon or evening. I did the same thing, Vice Chair Haggerty. The time is of the essence, I guess. But my remarks will be very, very brief tonight. I want to say welcome back to our traditional students and staff, and hope they had a very safe and restful spring break. Also want to thank the chamber, the Cary Chamber, for their principal and AP launching. And so was joking with Ms. Edmonds that what are we going to do next week when we don't have a lunch meeting before the board meeting. But it was always great to see and be in community with our principals and APs to learn the great things that are happening in their schools. Last week, I had the opportunity of visiting Northwoods Elementary, Adams Elementary, which is a year-round school in District 9, and East Cary Magnet Middle School. I enjoyed hearing from the global ambassadors that gave us a tour to talk about the great things that are happening and to hear their perspective. And so I am extremely grateful to those principals for welcoming me into their schools, and always excited to see the great things that our students are doing. And just to reiterate the point that if you have not completed the survey for the superintendent search, please, ma'am, please, sir, get that input to us before next week. And we're looking forward to the great things, and also looking forward to the budget discussion. And so I want to thank the superintendent and her team for putting this together, and look forward to the powerful dialogue that we'll have to ensure that our students and teachers and families have the needs that they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Caulfield.
Hello. Hope everybody enjoyed their break, and welcome back to all the students and staff that had off. I wanted to say congratulations to all those teachers that were recognized at the Celebration for Teacher Excellence that we were able to be part of. Once again, I want to remind everybody of the board advisory. We have the joint meeting with District 1 and 3 over at Heritage High School, and we'll speak about the new superintendent survey, the search, and how that is important to everybody in our community. The community survey is on our website. As they've said, it's very important that you all reach out and find out how you can get that if you haven't already done it. It gives us a lot of understanding about what our community wants and what's important to them. And I don't have any more awareness as of April. I think we're pretty full with that one. In our last meeting, we got to in the student recognition meeting, it was very inspiring to hear the stories of all the students that sat in front of us. And I think there was quite a few times when we were passing around the tissues, both in happy and inspiring achievements from all of those students. So congratulations to all those students that came and gave us one happy day to sit and recognize them all. Wake Forest High School has their performance, The Sound of Music, that is coming up April 21st and 22nd, also on the 28th and the 29th. And Heritage High School has Mean Girls that's coming up April 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and then the 27th through the 30th. So please go out and enjoy their talent. You will definitely be pleased. So that's all I have.
All right. Thank you. If we can get a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any comments, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, we do have one information item before we get to public comment. And I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Johnson-Hostler to introduce this item.
Thank you very much. And I certainly, you all, some of you who follow us, quite a few of you in this room, know that I promised my dear colleague, Roxy Cash, that I would always continue to support the work and elevate the work that she began here. And she did a great deal of that. But today, this evening, I get to introduce the partnership that we have with Activate Good, which you'll hear from them, the work that they've done. Ms. Cash included me, fortunately, because she had heard me for many years, talk about the support of some of our schools who don't have thriving fundraising PTAs and what works. How could we, as board members, but also as a community, support those schools? And you'll hear about Elevate shortly from both Amber and Rose, and Mr. Cook will formally introduce them. But I would be remiss if I didn't give a great deal of appreciation and gratitude to Roxy Cash and Damon Sarcosta from the A.J. Fletcher Foundation, who supported this work to get up and running in our schools in Wake County. And I'm glad that we finally were able to bring you all to the table so that you can hear the great work that has happened. And I certainly can speak from personal experience, especially from, there are lots of favorite things, but the break room was life-changing at Creech Road Elementary. I went there during teacher work days, during the transition of the holiday break. It was the first time they really, literally had a break room, which seems minuscule to so many of our larger schools who've always had a break room, and but theirs was full of stuff. Mostly paint that had not been put on walls. But thanks to the volunteers and the support of Activate Good and the work that you are doing with our schools. So I had to say that because every time I think about it, the teachers always say, tell people about the work that they did in our schools. And so again, Mr. Cook will officially recognize you all, but thank you very much for the work and efforts and patience that you've sustained as we figure out how to get businesses back into our buildings now. So thank you all for the work and patience that you've certainly showed us.
Vice Chair Haggerty, Superintendent Moore, and board members. We do appreciate the opportunity, as Ms. Johnson-Hostler just referenced, to take a few minutes to highlight some of the impactful work, past, present, and future, of an important and valued community partner, which the Wake County Public School System and our broader community, our students, our staff, are so fortunate to have. And no more appropriate time to make this recognition than what I've learned is Global Volunteer Month, among others. Among other efforts, Activate Good helps to recruit and connect volunteers with hundreds of community partners around the Triangle, including the Wake County Public School System. Notably, and as many of you may recall, in the early stages of the pandemic 3 years ago, in the spring of 2020, Activate Good partnered with our district, technology services staff, and others to mobilize more than 200 volunteers to configure Wi-Fi hotspots and to distribute 50,000 laptops in a matter of weeks to students. That's just one example of the important work that Activate Good is engaged in to support our schools and our students over the past decade plus. So to share a little bit more information about what they do, including current and future community involvement and volunteering opportunities, it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Executive Director Amber Smith and Senior Programs Manager Rose Thompson.
Good evening, esteemed board and guests tonight. Can we get my slides back up here? Thank you. I'm Amber Smith. I'm the Executive Director.
And I'm Rose Thompson.
We're with Activate Good. We're a small part of the Activate Good team, and it is just such an honor to be here with you tonight to share some of the work that we're doing and honor the partnership that we've had with you all and explore and dream about how we can support each other in the future. So I want to start by just asking a question, and board members, I don't know if you can see what's on the screen, but this is a question for you, and it's a question for everyone in the audience too. I'd love to just see by a show of hands if you have felt any one of these ways before in the past. So raise your hand if you've ever felt unsure how to help a problem you saw on the news, or a problem was too big or complex for your actions to matter, or perhaps that you didn't have sufficient time or resources to contribute to making a meaningful impact. That's so many of us. That's right. And you know what? We're not alone. A recent study by our friends at Points of Light showed that 66% of the Americans that they surveyed don't feel like their actions can make an impact. When you consider the population of the United States and the population of our local community, think of how many thousands of people that is who might have a passion or desire to get involved, but who might be facing barriers to getting involved in their communities. We also learned that 40% of people are not sure what they can do that would be helpful, and 44% are not sure where to find opportunities to engage. And all of this is part of what's called the civic empowerment gap, that Dr. Levinson at Harvard says is as large and disturbing as the nationally recognized reading and math achievement gaps. Imagine all the potential that's lost when people can't get involved easily in their community. So Activate Good's mission, and to provide the foundation, the context for why we're here tonight, Activate Good's mission is to make it easy to get involved. And our ultimate vision is a world in which all people both realize and act on their power to improve their communities. What we do is we invite everyone in this room, everyone in the region, to join us on a journey of learning, because we're always learning, taking action and community building to become agents of positive change in the triangle. So learning means we talk about local issues and we learn about ourselves, our community, and how we can help. Action means that we facilitate opportunities to volunteer and make an impact. And community building means we're going on this journey together. Now, since we've gotten started in 2005, we've been honored to partner with over 600 organizations. That's a lot of nonprofits. It's also so many schools right here in Wake County, to get people out there, get the people volunteering to meet the needs that they're seeing on the ground. We have almost 39,000 people in our volunteer network who are out there doing good. And since we got started, and also since we were able to start tracking this effectively, we've tracked over 100,000 volunteer connections in our community. What that looks like day to day is our large-scale days of service, many of which benefit schools. We have a youth volunteer course, so we can get those students out there volunteering and families. We have transformational projects that we work with businesses on, again, many of which are in our schools. And we have our volunteer opportunity database where our partners are posting and sharing their needs, and people in the public can sign up to meet those needs. So now that you understand a little bit about our mission and why we do what we do, I want to share a little bit more about our history with you all as our partners. There's so many different ways we've partnered throughout the years, but one of the earliest ways was by introducing a leadership and service curriculum many years ago, and some of our first adopters of that curriculum that taught teenagers all about leadership and service in their community were Broughton and the Leadership Academies and East Wake. Partnerships for student service. I mentioned we work with youth volunteers. Well, we are happy to work with schools and youth groups and after-school clubs to facilitate youth volunteerism. Of course, we mentioned earlier the partnerships during COVID-19. It was our honor to support the school system in getting hotspots out there and laptops for the kids to learn remotely. Youth Volunteer Corps, that connects to our student services as well, but that's for ages 11 to 18 to get out there during supervised projects where students are both learning more in depth about the community issues and volunteering with us as well. And finally, like I mentioned before, our opportunity database, where many schools are already partners with us and are able to post their volunteer needs so that we can recruit volunteers to help support and fill those needs. We also have a number of youth and school groups from schools who are also volunteering. I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague Rose now to share about the Elevate Schools project.
We are so excited to share about this impact campaign here tonight, and what better audience and platform to be able to do it with all of you here and those at home listening. So a bit about this. As you know, schools and PTAs located in under-resourced communities often have less access to volunteer support and resources than other schools. As we created this project, our vision was to mobilize community individuals, businesses, corporate groups, other community members to gather and really pour some love on those schools and elevate them with their time, their resources, and their talents. Community support matters. That's no secret. I think we all know that. That's why we've got this room full here today. And between COVID-19, learning loss, staff shortages that seem to be plaguing schools across our nation, and other challenges, schools need support from communities that they serve in order to thrive, as do our students. So a bit about this awesome project. We have worked with 5 schools over the last year in our pilot cohort, and we are working with 17 over the course of 3 years. We have worked with schools to determine what their volunteer needs are and bring in community support to rally and get behind them with ongoing volunteer needs or other service projects that they may have. All of these partners have free access to our website to post their volunteer needs at any time. Throughout this partnership and beyond, that website is called Golden. It's a great volunteer management platform for schools to utilize. And as Ms. Johnson-Hostler mentioned, this came about from seed funding from the A.J. Fletcher Foundation, but also from a lot of sponsorships and community support. So what does this cycle look like? First, our schools apply to be a part of this. Last year, we had 5 that we worked with. We go out and we perform a needs assessment with school leaders and PTA members to really determine what the needs are at those schools and create a volunteer mobilization plan in order to address their ongoing internal needs as well as their large transformative needs at the schools. Additionally, we perform the outreach in order to rally community support to fulfill all of those needs and really strategize how to rally that support and gather that and get it to our schools. Sorry. After this partnership, though, all of these members are able to utilize our site indefinitely. A few impacts from our pilot cohort that I'm happy to share with you tonight. I did mention we work with 5 Title I schools. We also worked to rally supplies for student kits for every student at those 5 schools, as well as staff appreciation kits for every staff member within those buildings. We worked with nearly 1,000 volunteers to make that possible, and you can see here about how much time and effort was put into these projects, as well as community resources. We couldn't do this without the support of many private funders and businesses who have made this possible. So nearly $75,000 has been given to these schools in resources and, again, time and talent. The 5 schools that took part in our pilot cohort were Wildwood Forest, Bailiwick, Creech Road Elementary, Barwell Road, and Fox Road. All amazing schools. They made us feel so welcome. We truly feel like we're part of their family when we enter their doors. And those are just a few of the, I have a few amazing stories to share here tonight. At Bailiwick, we put in a community garden. Additionally, we helped to mulch the grounds, paint multiple classrooms, and create a STEAM learning room. At Wildwood Forest, we did some similar projects that were very transformational, as well as rallying our Triangle Businesses for Good and other corporate partners to take part in a career day. I also was one of the presenters. It was great to explain what a nonprofit is to elementary students. And at Fox Road Elementary, they posted a lot of their ongoing needs within their school, and we also took on a lot of transformative projects there. We have a great testimonial here that we wanted to share with you from their media coordinator. There were multiple sign-ups for folks to come in and just support her work in the library, one of which was a retired librarian who came for multiple shifts, which was pretty amazing. Additionally, we have a picture here of a volunteer with the North Carolina Education Lottery who came as a group to help create the staff appreciation kits. And at that time, she got to reunite with her elementary school teacher, her favorite teacher. And it was great for her to just return to her elementary school and be able to put that community support out there and show her love for that teacher in that school. At Creech Road, you mentioned that staff lounge. Well, there it is on the right. We took on a huge transformative project there during our 9/11 day of service, new paint, new furniture, other materials, and came back during our MLK day of service to do even more painting projects and mulching and campus grounds work. At that time, our volunteers met a brand new teacher. It was her very first day, helped her unload her car, helped her prepare her classroom for the school year. So, folks don't realize just how much work new teachers and all teachers need in order to get that work done in their classrooms. So she was met with a whole team of support that day. At Barwell Road Elementary, they have experienced some changes in school leadership, rebranding, and some staffing shortages and staff workload because of that. We have given this school new life with paint. And, you know, a fresh, clean coat of paint can just help to lift and brighten the spirits of the staff there and the students there. So many hallways have been retouched with paint there in that school, and it's been amazing. They've actually made us part of their family there at Barwell. They have the family system. And additionally, you know, the staff there were moved to tears when speaking to our volunteers. And it was touching, and I'm getting worked up now just thinking about it. Speaking to the staffing shortages and how it's affected their work, and just how appreciative they were of having the greater community come into their school and support them in this way. A new coat of paint doesn't sound that exciting, but it truly is huge for an elementary school that can't get that paint but once every 11 years or so. So we want to do even more good together with all of you here, all of you listening, and the board. We want you to help by spreading the word about Activate Good, about the Elevate Schools project. Help us by considering opportunities to advocate and support this project, and also continue the conversation about ways that we can partner through this Elevate Schools project. Here are some ways that you can do that. You can certainly visit our website, activategood.org/Elevate Schools. Learn more about it, sign up for the volunteer needs that are listed there. Help to support the PTAs of these schools and schools across your district, of course. I know many of you are doing that, but these schools need our support now more than ever. So please consider signing up to volunteer and sharing about Activate Good. And also there is a video embedded in the presentation you're welcome to share with your networks. See someone we all know here. So here we have ways to advocate and support for this project. We ask that you help us navigate the current school volunteer processes. It's a little bit different at each school, and we'd like to continue this conversation with you about that. Additionally, help to learn about our volunteer services and our software that we can offer to the schools. We'd love for every school to use it. Beyond our Elevate Schools partners, we do have many other schools that we are partnered with who do post their volunteer needs on our website. That can be done by PTA leaders or internal staff members. Brainstorm with us about ways to remove barriers from community members to help with the schools, please. Let's continue this conversation. We'd like to figure out ways that we can more deeply partner and get the work done in these schools, and help us to continue this conversation, help us to connect with more resources that you may have or community members may have who are listening here tonight. We would love to just continue the conversation and get the good work done.
And now, if there are any questions.
Well, I want to say thank you, Rose and Amber, for your partnership and the work that you're doing to help fill in the gaps in so many of our schools where their PTAs are either non-existent or struggling. And thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, for sharing your personal stories with Creech Road and Barwell. And I know that this was something that Ms. Cash was very excited to see get off the ground. So are there questions or comments from board members at this time? No? Yep.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And, Ms. Cash being my predecessor, I would like to carry the torch. Going into being in this position and learning, there is some schools like the ones that you quoted, the ones that are in District 3, that don't have parents who are able to participate in the PTA. And so I'm just glad that there is an avenue for community to really wrap their arms around these schools. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Can I respond to that as well? Just add an additional comment. And what we're learning is that the PTAs at these schools are so many different levels of growth, and sometimes coming back together after a period apart. They're all in a different place. But one thing that's really important to us that we want to make clear is that we're centering the voices of the teachers and the faculty and the parents of these schools. And we want to not come in and assume the needs or impose what we think the needs are, but hear and listen from these stakeholders what they're saying the needs are, and have the community listen to that as well and wrap their arms around these schools. So I just wanted to make sure that was known.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler and Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I do think that is important to know that you all are in deep conversation with the school community, even after the needs assessment. Like Barwell got a new principal, also got 2 new PTA members, and you all were very patient in walking through the process, hearing what the needs were. And so I can't say enough. And I just leaned over to Mr. Swanson and said, I failed to mention probably the thing that did bring me to tears is you had a picture up there when Coastal Federal Credit Union came, and you were there, Amber. They lined up the school, did a full parade, and not just included our teachers, but every single person in that building. Like, I had our CNS workers and our custodial staff saying, "Is this for me too? We're not teachers." And they said it's teacher appreciation. And they went above and beyond for every single person in that building. That literally did almost bring me to tears, because it was clear to me that while, yes, we have all these appreciation days, one of the things I think most children know is Teacher Appreciation Day. And so I, as a parent, had a whole new perspective that everybody in that building, and I always say, from our bus drivers to our CNS, those 2 are probably the first 2 people who see our children every day, and we don't acknowledge them the same way. And so I would be remiss if I did not give a shout out to Coastal Federal Credit Union for acknowledging that in that space, walking over to them, bringing them into the crowd. Yeah, it still makes me emotional to think about just the look and the sense of inclusion and gratitude that we witnessed that day.
That was a great day.
And I'm clearly emotional talking about all of it.
I just want to say thank you for the presentation, and it's really great to see like creative and resourceful ways that we can bring help to all our different schools, because they do have so many different needs and so many different conditions our schools are in, and what our students need. They're coming from everywhere. For me, I know that I've had family that their PTA was kind of non-existent, and they just didn't have the ability or the time or the funds. And I've also known that we've had neighboring schools where our school was blessed with Boosterthon, and they were able to get new whiteboards and new playgrounds. And we weren't a very old school, but meanwhile, the neighboring school, they got dropped from the program because they couldn't even raise enough money. So just to have something like this where you can add that extra layer, we're always asking all of our community members to come in and volunteer with our students and everything and help in any way they can. And it's just really, it's a blessing to have something like this that you can add something extra to our students. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'm sure we will all be sharing on how people can get involved, and thank you for highlighting this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We now will move on to public comment. Speakers commenting on items on tonight's agenda will be heard first, and followed by speakers commenting on other topics. All speakers will be heard in order of sign up. If the public comment portion of the agenda exceeds 30 minutes, board policy states that the board chair reserves the right to conduct other board business before inviting remaining speakers back to the podium. Members of the public are welcome to offer comments or criticism directed at substantive ideas, actions, or procedures of the board and individual board members. The laws and policies of North Carolina provide that issues or concerns involving individual personnel and individual student matters are confidential and therefore not appropriate for public comment settings. Concerns related to personnel issues or student matters may be addressed through applicable WCPSS personnel, the grievance policy, or other applicable policies. Those offering comments to the board, including students, may discuss issues and matters of general concern. During the public comment period, you may speak for up to 3 minutes. A green light will illuminate at the podium when you begin. A yellow light will light up along with an audio tone when there are 30 seconds remaining in your time. And then a red light along with an audible tone will signal when your time is up and the next speaker will be called to the podium. We had some issues the last 2 times with this. Our test run was successful earlier, so we're going to keep our fingers crossed that we don't have to pivot to a paper system. But we will do that if we have to. In the interest of maintaining civility and decorum, speakers are encouraged to address their comments to the Board of Education and to refrain from personal attacks and insults directed at the board, individual board members, staff, or members of the general public. Please remain at the podium during your speaking time. Any materials you wish to share with the board should be handed to our board attorney, who's right over here, either before or after your comments. We do have 26 people signed up for public comment today. We will begin with those that signed up for on-agenda topics, and we will begin with Anna Stratus, followed by Bridget Bridges.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. My name is Anna Stratus, and I'm the cafe manager at Oberlin Magnet Middle School. Tonight is the third time that I have come before you to speak on behalf of CNS employees and to advocate for a livable and timely wage. I am grateful to the school board for listening on those past occasions and for the wage increases and bonuses provided. However, the reality remains that CNS employees are still struggling. Here's the truth. It is impossible to pay for all our bills by working for CNS alone. As you, and I'm sure every person in this room are aware, Wake County is not an inexpensive place to live, and the cost of living rates are continuing to rise with every passing month. In fact, at the time that we wrote the petition before you, just 2 months ago, Wake County identified that a livable wage for a single adult was $18.20 an hour. Today, that wage has risen to $18.51, and yet starting employees in CNS are making only $16 an hour. And so I ask you this. How can you expect your employees to survive when they are earning nearly 15% less than the minimum livable wage? The answer is you can't. Without the support of a spouse, there is no way. We can't support ourselves, our children, and we cannot survive alone by working for just CNS. In fact, every single parent that I know in CNS works a second job, if not even a third. Budgeting for our bills is made even more difficult by the once-a-month salary pay schedule. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, a month between each can feel like an eternity. Let me give you an example. Imagine that today you applied for a position with CNS. A few days later, you're scheduled for an interview. And a few days after that, you receive a call from the area supervisor offering you the position. Excited to start your new job, you put in your 2 weeks notice at your old job and wait for HR to contact you. Typically, this takes about a month. It is now May and you have been without income for 2 weeks. So you're excited when you finally receive that phone call from HR with your start date. It is now 1 month later and you really need that paycheck. It's June and you've been without income for 6 weeks. However, you just learned that the finance department requires an extra month to process you in the system, and you still won't see any money for some time. Another month passes before you finally see a paycheck, and it's July and it's been nearly 10 weeks since you've seen any income. Now imagine when you finally receive that paycheck that it's less than the minimum earnings needed to live in Wake County. And then is when you might begin to understand why we continue to have staff shortages in CNS and positions across the district. Tonight I stand before you with my union by my side, asking you to address these critical issues by adjusting the pay schedule to a biweekly check, including a livable wage for all public school staff in the 2023-24 school budget. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bridget Bridges, followed by Christy Banyas. Bridget Bridges, followed by Christy Banyas. I will also say that those microphones are adjustable, so if the person before you is of a different height, please adjust them.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Bridget Bridges, and I bring you greetings from the EC Transportation Department, where I am a safety assistant. We arrive to work between 5:15 and 6 a.m. to board transportation over the dangerous highways, having to relinquish all of our control for our safety to our assigned driver in pursuit to pick up our students. Due to our children's special needs, we never know what to expect. I've experienced and have been told about injuries due to car crashes, being assaulted by students, being verbally abused by parents and or students due to issues we have no control over, We've had to become nursing assistants, along with being infestated with bed bugs and roaches. We go into some of the most dangerous communities in the Wake, Johnston, Durham, and other counties to pick up our children, deliver them to school and back home. Our children have mental health challenges, emotional struggles, developmental handicaps, behavioral issues, and homelessness. Yet, with all these obstacles, we do our job successfully with pride and compassion. Now we're asking for compassion to be given to us. We, the safety assistants, request a building with an increase of toilets and with space large enough to house us so we can come out of our cars where we freeze and become sick in the winter, and we broil, suffocate, and become deathly ill during the summer. Even your dogs get better treatment than this. We also request a grade increase from 17 to 20 in order for us to receive an hourly wage that will bring us closer to the living wage. That way, some of us won't have to work multiple jobs, while others of us can finally be done with the welfare assistance. And lastly, we the SAs want control over how we utilize our annual time. That way, we can better balance our time and our salary. And let me not forget to mention our need for sufficient light in our parking lot to decrease the injuries and near car accidents. It's not only my coming to request these changes, but it's over 2/3 of my coworkers who have joined NCAE Public School Union, along with the bus drivers, cafeteria workers, requesting for these changes. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Christy Banyas, followed by Christina Spears. Christy Banyas, followed by Christina Spears. I do want to note that it's a little warm in here. There is a drinking fountain outside of that door if anybody needs something to drink.
Good evening, Chair and members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Christy Banyas, and I'm an assistant manager at Scotts Ridge Elementary School, although previously I was a floater between kitchens throughout Apex area schools and an assistant manager at Apex Friendship Middle. I'm here today to bring to your attention a critical issue in CNS that impacts the culture of kitchens all across this county: the lack of appropriate training and support of new hires in CNS. Wake County Child Nutrition Services writes on their hiring page, and I quote, "As part of the CNS team within the Wake County Public School System, you'll love the camaraderie of your team," end of quote. This is the ideal that inspired me to join the CNS family, but the reality of the work is far more isolating. When I first started as an assistant manager, I was aware that I'd be expected to fill in for my cafe manager should she be absent. I was aware of this, my manager was aware of this, my training supervisor, my training specialist and my supervisor were all aware of this. However, when that day came that my manager was unable to come to work, I was woefully unprepared to step into her shoes. With the help of fantastic coworkers, we were able to serve our kids breakfast and lunch, but for the responsibilities of coordinating orders, processing inventory, and so many other critical administrative works, I was left to figure it out on my own, without the help of any support and training. Imagine yourself in my shoes, and you'll be able to understand how completely incompetent and alone I felt. It was exhausting, frustrating, and very, very lonely. Time and time again, I've seen this exact situation play out. In the few short weeks that I was floating between schools, I watched several individuals brought into kitchens that I was working in without necessary training that was needed for them to adequately perform their jobs. Workers were placed in the kitchens unprepared, without the resources to seek out, other than the experience of their other coworkers, who, already being overworked, became frustrated with the now extra duty of training those new employees. The frustration fuels a cycle where the new employees are frustrated with their lack of training. The veteran staff are exhausted by the additional work that's now fallen onto their already full plates. And as you can imagine, this doesn't foster camaraderie, it fosters isolation. I'm thankful to have found my camaraderie and hope within the union and just the peace that I felt with NCAE. It's because of this that I feel hope for CNS and for the future of my career here in Wake County. Unfortunately, my rocky beginning and so many of the other coworkers' experiences doesn't inspire them to think of CNS as a long-term career. It's specifically because of the lack of support and the sense of isolation that I've seen so many of my coworkers resign from CNS. This isn't the fault of our training specialists nor our supervisors. We know they're overworked and understaffed as well. This is the fault of a poorly funded program. So again, my ask of you tonight is to address the critical need for support and training by including additional funds for CNS in the 23-24 budget. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Christina Spears, followed by Demetria Harvey. Christina Spears, followed by Demetria Harvey.
Good evening, board members and district staff. I'm Christina Spears, a special education teacher, proudly serving as the Wake NCAE president. Wake NCAE is the local affiliate of the North Carolina Association of Educators, an organization formed in 1970 after the merger of the North Carolina Education Association, an org of white teachers, and the North Carolina Teachers Association, an org of black teachers. NCAE is the state affiliate of NEA, formed in 1857, and we're home to over 3 million members. I wanted to lean into a history lesson and put some respect on our name tonight. As also as a PhD student, I'm learning about the role of school boards and the impact of labor unions on our public school system. Since their establishment in the late 19th century, public school labor unions have petitioned school boards and state legislators to improve material working conditions and increase funding for our workers, because they knew then what we know now, that fully funded public schools recruit and retain a strong professional workforce. As a result of racist, classist Jim Crow laws in the South, working class people like us were stripped of their rights to legally unionize. People in power like legislators, privatizers, school board members, even superintendents continue to call us a professional organization and assume we do not recognize the connections between politics and power, our experience as workers, and the impact it has on our children. We call ourselves a labor union because unions, with or without collective bargaining rights, are groups of workers who work together with shared interests to use our collective power to improve our lives at work. We're politically engaged, we deliver petitions to school boards, we request meetings with you all, and we fight to ensure the schools we love are fully funded both locally and statewide. For us, as politically active workers in Wake County Public School System, we know that the district's budget that y'all are working on tonight is a political process and is a reflection of our institutional values and priorities. Our CNS workers, safety assistants, and the staff at West Cary Middle School are standing on the shoulders of public school workers and union members who have made these demands for decades, even centuries. We are asking for buildings and facilities that allow us to do our jobs with dignity. We are asking for livable wages so our folks don't have to work multiple jobs and can serve our students with attention and care. We are asking for training and support to provide the sound public education every student deserves. We are proud to continue a legacy of fighting for public schools by engaging in tonight's budget process and in the coming meetings. And I just want to remind us that WCPSS had a historic merger and a legacy of equity. Please don't forget the role of the public school union as a critical component in that history then and now. I hope you will consider this impact on our current conditions, your place in that lineage by fully funding a 23-24 budget. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Demetria Harvey, followed by Daniel Grant King. Again, that's Demetria Harvey, followed by Daniel Grant King.
Good evening, Wake County Board members. My name is Demetria Harvey, and I am a safety assistant for the past 12 years. Us safety assistants accompany students with disabilities to and from school. Without us, some of most vulnerable students would never be able to get educated. We have to do anything and everything during our rides, from wiping snot to administrating hose. If a student starts to get out of hand, we have to control them. Our vacancy rate is 35% and is highest among all job types in this district. In order to keep me and my coworkers in this job for a long haul and attract new safety assistants, we need two changes. First, our pay grade has to be increased. We serve the same students as IA assistants serve, but they are paid $21 while we're 17. Is that fair? We're not only serve the same students, but we have to do it alone without support with nurses, certified staff, or administrators. And we do all this moving on a vehicle in a hostile environment on traffic. Second, we need a better facility. Our parking lot is so dark that we have numerous of coworkers tripping, falling, injuring. Some of our coworkers have even drove into each other. We do not have an actual building. Instead, we have a trailer where a snake had been found since the last month. We have a break room that can't all of us fit in there. This means when it's either cold or hot, we are sitting out in our cars. I would like to thank Mr. Mark Strickland for the chief facilitator of the operations for having meeting with us multiple times to address our facility concerns. He is working on getting lights up in our parking lot, as well as getting us temporary air-conditioned space before the summer heat sets. He discussed plans, moving us to a building A, which is much bigger than our current trailer. All of that sounds promising, but we need these changes made as quickly as possible. We need lights today. Our safety can't wait. It's not just me and my fellow safety assistants here today. I am joined with a union, and I ask that you all would please get us a facility. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Daniel Grant King, followed by Kay Mensa. Daniel Grant King, followed by Kai, thank you, Mensa. All right. Kai, let's call you next. Kai, I'm very, very sorry.
You try.
All right, and then Lauren Gordon will be following.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kai Manson. I have worked in Wake County School since 2010. I started as a cashier assistant at Millbrook High School. Right before COVID, I did the training to become a manager. And I started as a manager at Panther Creek High School in January 2020. We have a lot of equipment problems. We have 2 milk coolers that have been broken for more than 6 months. Maintenance people have come by many times to fix them, but right now only one is working. For the second one, they even stated that they don't even know what's wrong with it. But it doesn't get replaced. We complain about the equipment problems, but nothing gets done. We have to talk to the administrations of the school because nothing gets done. Earlier this year, despite our efforts to pull pans of ice from the freezer to cool the milk, the students were complaining about the milk being sour. It wasn't out of date, but it was because the cooler was broken. Parents called me to complain. At the time, I only have 2 employees working with me. We were running around like crazy, working for the full line. I am supposed to have 5 employees. I am supposed to be doing my pre-planning, writing down my list for ordering, inputting sales in the computer. Instead, I am on the floor, prepping and backing the line by myself. Eventually, Panther Creek administrator noticed and asked me if I needed help, and they stepped in to help. Sometimes, we aren't even able to open the line to serve lunch at 10:30 when we are supposed to because we are behind. It affects my family. I work 5:30 a.m., sometimes to 5 or 6 p.m. My husband and my kids start calling me. They get worried. For a while, I was on health restriction, but I had little to no help in the morning. I wasn't supposed to get running around on the line. But since I have no one to help me and save the student, I have to do it. We do this because we love our job, we love our student, but we also need to take care of our family. I get involved in the union NCAE to talk to other people to see if we can get more help to try and fix what is broken. When I got involved and had our first meeting,
Thank you, Ms.
I heard the
Mensa. Your
same
time
thing
is up.
everywhere.
Thank
We need
you.
to replace the old equipment
Our
so
next
that it's
speaker
usable.
is
so
Lauren
we can have to
Gordon.
kill ourselves.
Our
We
next-
need to hire new
our-
people. And
Thank
in
you.
order
Our
to
next
do that,
speaker is
we
Lauren
need to
Gordon.
raise our hourly pay
And followed by
so
Ms.
that
Gordon will
people
be
can
Patricia Collins.
breathe. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to remind people that we have 26 speakers tonight, and we all have 3 minutes to speak. And these are all, we appreciate you being here. Ms. Gordon, and you'll be followed by Patricia Collins.
Hi, my name's Lauren Gordon. I do want to say I'm very supportive of NCAE, but I'm here to talk about something else tonight. I'm a mom of 2 young children who will soon be students in the Wake County public school system. In 2007, I was a student at Virginia Tech where a gunman killed 32 of my friends, classmates, and educators. I'm here to address the board about preventing gun violence at schools in Wake County. I do want to state now that although my background and experiences I just shared are anecdotal, the statistics and recommendations I'm going to cite are based completely in facts and evidence. We now know that firearms are the #1 killer of children in the United States. They kill more children than car accidents, cancer, and any other childhood illness or accident. If my children or your children die before they become adults, a gun will be the most likely reason. 4.6 million children in the U.S. live in a home with at least one unlocked and loaded firearm. Coupled with the fact that in incidents of gunfire on school grounds, up to 80% of shooters under the age of 18 got the gun from their home or the homes of friends or relatives, the threat of children getting access to firearms and bringing them to school is greater than ever. In your school board code of ethics, it's stated you should remember always that a board member's first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students attending public schools. Our school board has the obligation to do everything they can to keep our children safe while at school, as there is no educational welfare for students that aren't breathing. I do applaud the board calling for lawmakers to pass a state statute requiring safe storage of firearms. I would also recommend you extend this support to an assault weapons ban in our state. More than 85% of fatalities and mass shootings are caused by assault rifles. Your influence is essential in demanding that lawmakers protect our children by passing legislation that keeps them safe. I also applaud you for presenting the Be Smart Firearms Guidelines at an earlier meeting. However, I was unable to locate these guidelines anywhere on the Wake County Public Schools website, even when I specifically searched Be Smart in the search bar. Within the School Safety and Emergencies Overview tab on the WCPSS website, there's no discussion around gun violence or preventing gun violence. On the student health page, there's a mention of suicide prevention, but nothing about how the majority of American suicide deaths involve firearms. In turn, my second recommendation is that we should train Wake County parents and guardians on Be Smart guidelines for firearm safety and provide resources and materials to them throughout the school year so it remains top of mind. For those, I'm not going to go over that. The school board should provide links on their website, encourage all Wake County schools to include it in their websites, and host presentations that can be attended in person and virtually at all schools for students and their guardians. Some of this may feel like just one more thing, but this type of gun safety education will literally mean life or death for many children in Wake County in the upcoming years.
Our next speaker is Patricia Collins, followed by Jessica Lewis. Patricia Collins, followed by Jessica Lewis.
Put my glasses on. To the school board and to all attendants, good evening. My name is Patricia Collins, and I am a safety assistant. I'm here this evening advocating for a much-needed raise for the labor that is required of WCPSS, Wake County Public School System employees, namely safety assistants, bus drivers, teachers, IAs, administrators, cafeteria workers, and custodians. We monitor, assist, and serve the most marginalized and vulnerable students in the school system. This work is very challenging and unpredictable. Each of these students must have our full attention in these vehicles, out of these vehicles, and in these vehicles, in the classrooms, cafeteria, restroom, including campus grounds. We want compensation for the work that we do, the labor that we labor for these children, and we should have the equal as the other departments of the Wake County Public School System. Because of our jobs that is so demanding, unpredictable, and dangerous, we are here to bring awareness to the public's eye about this group of special needs students who are so vulnerable and marginalized and left standing alone. They are the ones who suffer and seems not to be the ones that are helped. They are the least of all, and it should not be that way. We're going to give voice to these voiceless and to give to them that need hope. But most of us, we're going to show them love by standing up for them. And so we're asking everyone who does not belong to NCAE to unite with the others public school system and stand up for better pay and decent facilities. And I thank you for this time.
Our next speaker is Jessica Lewis, followed by April Henry. That's Jessica Lewis, followed by April Henry.
Good evening. I was once naive and believed that the public school system should be trusted to provide my kids with a great education. That trust was lost a couple years ago when my eyes were opened wide to what was being forced upon our kids. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is toxic. DEI attacks the integrity of academic goals. DEI is failing our students. I would like to see a new superintendent focus on academic excellence. I had my daughter's 6th grade meet and greet at what will be her new middle school next year. I took a screenshot of the books she will be reading in the curriculum to research them. You might ask why. I am about to tell you. This past school year, I was approved to be a Wake County substitute teacher in the school system. I knew there were pornographic books in the school libraries for our kids to check out, but I was shocked when I was subbing. I was shocked when I was subbing in a high school that these books are made mandatory reading for our students. Why are students being forced to read aloud about masturbation, pussy, anorexia, faggot, racist assholes, and committing suicide? These are all detailed descriptions in the book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. Do you honestly think our kids want to read this trash, especially in front of their peers? I can answer that question, as I was in the classroom when a female student said she was not going to read it and was laughed at by our teacher and peers. An investigation was done, but the school system has not provided a resolution. Another example of dismissing major concerns and sweeping it under the rug. I have also called the English curriculum department and left a few messages to not get one return phone call back. Can you please have her reach out to me? I would like to have a meeting with this person approving books like these. Ask yourselves, are you okay with your own children reading this material? Would you go into one of the schools you represent and read this book to the students? Whoever is approving these books needs to be fired. Books like these have no business being forced on our students. For people saying we are banning books, no, we are not banning books. We are parenting, looking out for the best interest of the information our children are consuming. These books are made to stay in the classroom so parents have no idea what their children are reading. Parents deserve the right to know. With more shootings, more suicides, more addictions, and more mental illness, do you really think this reading material is a good idea? My hope is the new superintendent will do a much better job with what is allowed as reading material for students. We need a superintendent who makes our children's safety a top priority by having more SROs in schools and adding metal detectors. We need a superintendent that pays the staff working directly with our children a reasonable living wage. This also includes social workers, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, and substitute teachers. We need a superintendent who focuses on reading, writing, and math. You have heard a lot of parents that want the focus to be on this. What are you waiting for? Are you going to listen? Stand strong for our children because they deserve an excellent education.
Next speaker is April Henry, followed by Becky Lou Hobbs. April Henry, followed by Becky Lou Hobbs.
Good evening. Good evening, board members and everyone here tonight. My name is April Henry, and I'm also a safety assistant. And my job as a safety, I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. My job as a safety assistant is ensuring the safety of special needs kids to and from school. As previous of some of my coworkers stated, that we get to work anywhere from 5 in the morning to 6, and sometimes you cannot even see where you're going because of the parking lot is so dark. Me personally, I've came close enough to hit one of my coworkers, and that was enough for me. Hoping that we as safety assistants get the training that we need to do our job as the best as we can. Also, a better working place, meaning bathroom, and of course, some might find it funny, ventilation. Reason being is because, one example, one day I came back from my route and really had to use the bathroom, but I made a choice to use the men's bathroom, and little do I know, someone almost walked in on me. We as safety assistants also need better pay. I'm speaking as a mother of a special need kid, and it has been more than a few times that I got home first before my child. Reason being is because of no drivers, no safety assistant to go on these routes to bring our kids home. More than half of the safety assistant staff has joined the NCAE union and been working together, speaking out on what we need to better our job as safety assistant. Thanks. And
our next speaker is Becky Lou Hobbs, followed by Colleen Miller. Becky Lou Hobbs, followed by Colleen Miller.
Happy Easter. We're still in the Easter season. I'm Becky Lou Hobbs, and I'm here to discuss a series of books that's in 2 middle schools and 18 of the 34 high schools. This series is called Assassination Classroom. It has more than a dozen books in the series. I handed Mr. Blumberg a printout. I would have hoped you guys would have looked at it, but I guess I will have to show a few of the pictures here. It depicts murder in the classroom. It depicts some very despicable acts in the classroom. Some of the things that this book talks about is assassinate your teacher. I've been wanting to kill a teacher. So this book depicts killings, murders, and sexual images. Supposedly, it's rated ages 16 and up. And here's a quote what the author says about it. Kill is a fascinating word. It's often used but rarely put into action. So I decided to create a story centered around this unique word. If you enjoy it, you can kill me now and I'll die happy. One of the basic tenets of the United States is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yet this author wrote a series of books that speaks about killing, murder, and assassination. Now, I don't have to repeat what has happened these past few weeks, but that's the very antithesis of life. With these books available in middle schools and high schools in Wake County, what is the literary value of these books? What possibly could they teach that is positive and life-affirming? These books talk about killing teachers, murder, assassination. How can you, in good conscience, allow these in our schools? And some of you board members prattle on, some of the previous board members prattle on about these horrible acts of violence that have occurred in our society, where people have lost their lives. But you, Wake County School Board, allow these types of books in the schools, talking about assassinations of kids, of students, and then you wonder why there is violence. These books need to be removed from each public school library now. Wake County needs to have a public school rating system on these books that needs to be age appropriate. They need to warn of violence, of murder, assassination, inappropriate sex, any other topic that might need to be looked at. We need to develop this. We don't have it. We have the abilities. Please keep these types of books out of our kids. A 16-year-old, in my opinion, should not be reading a book talking about killing a teacher. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Colleen Miller, followed by David Greeno. Colleen Miller, followed by David Greeno.
Good evening. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak tonight. For the record, I have a grandchild in Wake County Middle School, and my daughter graduated from Enloe High School in 2000, so I'm a grandma here. But I kind of changed my plans because Becky stole my thunder. I was going to talk about those books too. They're actually, I was astounded when I heard these books were in Wake County schools, and it's horrifying. I want to start off with reading from a book. So we got story time, ladies and gentlemen. So if your kids are in the room, anybody watching, you might want to mute this. The Haters by Jesse Andrews. Summary of concerns about this book is it contains obscene sexual activities, sexual commentary, excessive and frequent profanity. On page 101, it was definitely my boner. No one was awake to stare and discuss at the lurchy jailbreak of my sleep boner. Still had the boner, masturbating in a brisk, business-like manner into the sink with the hotel conditioner. Page 102, well, I don't know either, but it looks like jizz. Now, the language is not good English, just keep that in mind. Well, it's true or false, that's your jizz in our sink. Shut up about West, jizzing in the sink. Rinsing isn't always enough to get jizz all the way out of the sink. But I figured it wasn't just awkward because I had masturbated in the hotel sink. Page 265, she guided me onto my back and pulled me on the bottom of my briefs, and I pushed them over my knees and feet and was completely naked and not hard at all. She straddled me and pulled her top off, and her breasts flopped out, and I heard them more than saw them. She reached behind herself and kind of carefully took my not hard dick into one, and I couldn't really think about anything else. And pretty soon after I was hard and she shook her hand away, I heard her opening some little crinkly package. I could feel and felt her put the cool plastic middle of the condom snugly on the front of my dick. Anyway, you get I don't want to read anymore. I'm sick of it. You get the image. You get the count on the words used in this book. Ass was 18, bitch 6, cunt 1, dick 77. The F word was 196. The GD word 6, piss 10. The P word for girl parts 5, and the SH word 121 times. To me, that book has no business in any public school. How many billions of dollars do we spend on education every year in our public schools? What a waste of money these books are. There are hundreds of like books in our public schools. I have seen them for myself. I have read some of them, and they're disgusting. They make me want to vomit. So what I need from you, I ask from you is you find a way to keep these books like this out of the hands of minor students, like Becky suggested. A way to rate them and keep them away from our students. Why do we need to waste our money on these books? Thank you.
Our next speaker is David Greeno, followed by Donna Lupus. David Greeno and Donna Lupus.
Good evening, board members. I'm David Greeno, and I'm here supporting my company, USUV Clean, out of Wilmington, North Carolina. USUV Clean, you might ask, why is a guy from Wilmington driving all the way here with my co-workers here from Wilmington? Well, we've been reached out to by everybody you can think of, from parents to principals to bus drivers, because your buses, we've heard, are very, very short-staffed right now. And what we have done in the Santee Lynch's region of South Carolina, we have gone in with Congressman Jim Clyburn's with his gratitude and his support, along with Senator Tim Scott, we have installed what's called FAR UVC technology in your school buses. We've just finished up 331 school buses in 6 districts. These state engineers allowed us 90 days to get it done. We got it done in 6.5 days. We also installed the lights in 72 schools over 2,500 square miles. They allowed 90 days for that. We got it done in 3.5. What UVC technology does, it renders the DNA molecule of the nuclei of the cell. And Doc, you may know more about this than me, but what it does, the DNA helix, if you guys remember in biology, the DNA twisted ladder-looking thing, it rips out the rungs of the DNA. It renders everything, the pathogen, useless. The virus is inactivated. And so what I'm here suggesting is the shortage of your school bus drivers probably has to do something with the pay, probably has something to do with the bonuses, incentives. But I guarantee you one thing that I saw when we were driving in here, 8 of 8 school buses we saw, the driver was still wearing a mask. It is a safety issue because in the Santee Lynch's region, which is 80% at or below the poverty level, they are having no issues with their 331 school bus drivers. No issues. They're actually having from other counties apply and other districts apply to come drive buses there. They're not having troubles in hiring for their school systems, like the special needs classes. They're not seeing this issue. And it's amazing that during the Omicron and Delta variant, that the school system saw a 38 to 40% increase in instructional hours and attendance. Is it because of the lights? Maybe so. Another thing that it's hurting is these kids are being looked after by their grandparents, a lot of them in these rural areas, and they're bringing this stuff home to them. So now you've got kids that are being raised by no one. And that's what's spiking the juvenile crime rate in South Carolina, and it needs to stop here.
Our next speaker is Donna Lubis, followed by Janet Peterson. Donna Lubis, followed by Janet Peterson.
Good evening. My name is Donna Lubis. I am a retired teacher from Wake County. I started teaching in the 70s. I've taught in Connecticut, Puerto Rico, Fairfax County, Virginia, and I retired from Wake County after 30 years of teaching, so I've been around the block. Teaching has changed over the years, starting in the mid-70s. Teachers now, I don't see teachers now as being creative. They're not allowed to be creative. Back in the day, the curriculum was handed to us, and we were responsible for instilling that curriculum in the students by the end of the school year, and that's what we did. Now I feel teachers' hands are a little bit tied. I don't think the term equity jives with the term creative teaching. I don't think the two can go together. The achievement today is down. The test scores are down, and I can't hear that it's being blamed on COVID. That should be done with now. Students are graduating, not being proficient in reading and math. They're graduating. Where are they going? I think taxpayers should be up in arms about that. What are they paying for? They're paying for a generation of children who cannot go out and they'll be out here looking for minimum wage, and that is not fair. And what is up is depression, thoughts of suicide, sad kids. Where's that coming from all of a sudden? There are children around the world who are in war-torn countries, and they're happier than some of the kids in this country. Where is that coming from? It is mind-blowing to me. It seems, and I'm not just talking about Wake County, I'm talking about our country, it seems that school boards have become the parents of children. Parents have relinquished their children. Schools, you take care of them. And I think school boards are doing a lousy job. The kids are not learning, and the depression is growing. I don't know where that's going. And another thing that blows my mind is there is no discipline. Children cannot learn if they're just allowed to go, oh boy, we need discipline. If children are not listening, they're not being instructed. We're creating a two-tier society. Kids who go to private school and kids who go to public school. Do the math on that. Two-tier system. My two grandsons were in Wake County Public Schools a year and a half ago, both identified AG in advanced classes. They have since come out and are in private school. Thank you. And they had to do boatloads of work to catch up to the kids in the private school. That's sad.
Our next speaker is Janet Peterson, followed by Jim Walsh. Janet Peterson, followed by Jim Walsh.
Hi, before I start, I just want to say that I was once a member of NCAE, and I stand in solidarity with all these workers that work in the cafeteria and bus drivers, and they deserve better. They deserve better. I also had the privilege of teaching at Creech Road for 6 years. Love that school. So I'm here today because after spending 25 years teaching children to read, I am shocked and surprised at what is being made available for them to read. And so I want to share with you a book, and if there's any minors or children around, I hope that you leave the room quickly. I want to talk about the book Shine by Lauren Miracle. It has a pretty cover with a flower, and it looks very innocent. But there's no warning label on that book. This book is about a 13-year-old girl that discovers hidden secrets about drugs, alcohol, and sexuality. This book has profanity, derogatory terms, pedophilia, and it's located at Apex Middle School, Centennial Campus Middle, Ligon Middle, Wendell Middle, and it's at 16 high schools in our district. So I want to read a little bit of it to you so you get the idea. His breath smelled like my daddy's corn liquor. He fumbled at the elastic of my panties, but my cutoffs were too tight. And you know this is a youth, a minor. And he couldn't work his fingers to where he wanted. Come on, cat, let me feel how wet you are. I don't know what he meant. I pressed my spine into the sofa to get away from him, but moving like that raised my hips and loosened the hug of my shorts. His fingers slithered under my panties. Oh yeah, he said, moving his fingers the best he could. See now? I was lost. Tommy was touching a part of me that no one was supposed to. I was pushing against him, but he was so much bigger than me. It goes on. On the next page, by that point, Tommy had unbuttoned my shorts and yanked them down around my thighs, along with my panties. I was gripping them, trying to get them back up, but he was stronger. He had no longer had his hand down my tank top, but instead his arm was stretched across the back of the sofa, bearing his weight, while his left arm rode up the length of my belly, straight as a rod, until the sharp flex of his wrist. With Aunt Tildy standing frozen behind him in the doorway, he got one finger up inside me. I whimpered. He kept at it, the heel of his palm driving into my pelvic bone until he got in two more, and it goes on. I can tell you that if an 11-year-old had been molested, they certainly don't want to relive it by reading this book. And if they haven't been molested, they certainly don't want to read this book. There was no warning label on this book. It was attractive. School libraries are not the place for this kind of content. It is sexually inappropriate. I want you to consider explicit sex, violence, horror, profanity. What kind of criteria are you using when selecting books for the library?
Our next speaker is Jim Walsh, followed by Joseph Kingsley. That's Jim Walsh, followed by Joseph Kingsley.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, board. My name is Jim Walsh. I live in Cary. My son and I were having a conversation the other day. He's got a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old. Talking about movies. Well, they went to see Mario Brothers. Great movie, PG, they had a great time. The 10-year-old said, wait a minute, I want to go see Dungeons and Dragons. Can't go see it. It's PG-13. He has a dilemma. So, a 10-year-old can't go see that movie, but yet it got me to thinking about our society. Our society accepts having movies rated and even video games rated. This got me to thinking about how our society accepts these ratings. As society, parents, we feel safe knowing that the measured rating system is in place is acceptable in understanding the overall mental and visual level of maturity needed to enjoy and understand the material that is being displayed with specific movie or video game. As a matter of fact, it is so important that there's an entertainment software rating board. Hear this. This is their mission statement. Our mission is to help parents make an informed decision about video games and apps their children play. Our Advertising Review Council actively enforces industry-adopted advertising guidelines and privacy certificates. Wow, that's a powerful mission statement. So how do they do this? How do they have this rating system? Well, first of all, that rating system is published on the material that's being purchased, either on the outside cover, the CD, and or when the movie starts and or the game starts. And their rating system is fairly simple. E for everyone, E10, generally suitable for 10 and above. Teen, generally suitable for 13 and above. M17, oh, generally suitable. There's an interesting common theme here, generally suitable. This is a guideline. So what would happen if a Wake County employee of school system brought in a game of M17 to the schoolroom or an R-rated movie? How would that go over? But yet we have these books in our schools, and we don't have a problem. And the school board is well aware of it. That's a problem.
Our next speaker is Joseph Kingsley, followed by Karen Merchant. Joseph Kingsley, followed by Karen Merchant.
Hello, glad you guys are all doing well. There are nearly 200 schools and 160,000 students in Wake County, and it is our collective duty to protect each and every one of these students. I read that Wake County schools have 75 resource officers on school grounds. We should have at least 200 officers to ensure there is one at every school, although 2 at each school would be much better. Right now, the officers are stationed almost entirely at middle schools and high schools, despite elementary schools being targeted in shootings more frequently than both. Having officers near the school will not prevent a tragedy, but having them on school property certainly will. Resource officers deter fighting and bullying as well. We had another active shooter lockdown drill at my son's elementary school last week. I never had a lockdown drill when I was in school, but we did have an officer on the property every day. It was safe, and I felt safe. We now live in a sick country where mass executions of children don't last a week in the news cycle and are forgotten until the next one a few months later. Everyone talks about common sense gun laws, and I'm all for that. But gun laws in our culture are not going to change anytime soon, and we need a solution now. Common sense is having police officers at every school. When bad people want to hurt good people, they always find a way to get a weapon. But those deranged cowards rarely target places with police officers on duty. They always attack gun-free zones, the softest, easiest targets. There is no reasonable argument against having armed police protecting our children. We have armed guards in so many other places. They're all around us all the time. But we neglect the most important and most vulnerable. A small number of grossly misinformed and cynical people have said resource officers will not prevent shootings. That is a patently false and ridiculous claim. There are far too many examples to point out the absurdity of statements like that. You may hear people say a police presence creates a bad environment. Compared to the environment of widespread terror created by school shootings, absolutely not. Children know police are there to protect them. I always felt safe with officers in my school. Our kids are everything. Safety protocols should be at the forefront of the annual budget. Children are the most important thing, and we have to protect them. What could possibly be more important than protecting them? We should use every practical measure to keep them safe every single day. That should be the top priority for all of us, including all of you and the new superintendent. We need armed police officers at every school in Wake County. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Karen Merchant, followed by Chris Oltrogi.
Good evening. I spoke at the last meeting in March with other OTs and PTs. I spoke about how non-competitive salaries, the impact that they have on retention of experienced staff. I have 19 years of special education experience, 11 of those serving as an OT in Wake County. Among many other things, April is Occupational Therapy Month. I, along with a couple of other OTs, want to give you a glimpse into our roles in the school setting. Since speaking in March, I've met with multiple state representatives and senators to discuss recognizing OTs and PTs as educators, moving our professions to the certified scale. During many of these meetings, I was asked, how does an occupational therapist support children, and why are we called occupational therapists? Our role is to support the engagement and participation in a person's daily occupations. For children in a school setting, their occupation is a student and a classmate. OTs promote independence, skill development, and engagement in their academic activities and their daily routines. My day may consist of singing Ring Around the Rosie and building a garage out of blocks with a 3-year-old before transitioning to a 5th grade classroom to support a student with identifying visual strategies and modifications for cluttered assignments. We provide specially designed instruction through targeted interventions in conjunction with consultation and collaboration with our special education colleagues. Maintaining experienced staff has a direct impact on student services, and collaboration offered by an experienced OT provides valuable contributions to our teams. In my time as an OT, I have provided training during staff meetings and mentoring for new therapists. I support new teachers in facilitating meetings and navigating IEP paperwork, which helps ensure compliance with special education regulations. This is critical given the current vacancies and turnover in our special education setting. Retention of school-based OTs provides unique opportunities for developing and maintaining family relationships, as we often serve students for multiple years. In addition, our collaboration with outside providers creates a bridge and consistency between the community, the home, and the school settings. OTs support our teams and administrators in understanding the least restrictive environment, given our knowledge of multiple settings and regional programs. Our view of the whole child allows us to support adapting and differentiating instruction to meet the needs of our most unique learners. In other settings, OTs are viewed as medical professionals. But because of the many reasons I described, in a school-based setting, we are educators. Just as we advocate for our students with disabilities, we will continue to advocate at the county and the state levels for recognition and compensation as an educator within the school-based setting. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Chris Oltrogi, followed by Kirsten Howe.
I just want to say that you're the first person who's ever tried to say my name correctly the first time, so I'm so impressed. That's literally the first time that's ever happened. Okay, good evening. My name is Chris Oltrogi, and I've been an occupational therapist with Wake County since January of 2021. I'm here to help answer a question I get all the time. What exactly is occupational therapy? Occupational therapy, or OT, is not an easy career to define. OTs can work in schools, hospitals, outpatient clinics, rehab facilities, and more. Treatment looks very different in each setting, but ultimately, our goal is the same. The goal is to improve a person's ability to perform activities or occupations that are meaningful to them. In the schools, OTs help students of all ages and all ranges of ability to engage in meaningful occupations such as play, communication, writing, creating art, eating meals, and using the restroom. We perform evaluations and set goals. We provide direct therapy, adaptive equipment, and environmental modification. We consult with IEP teams, implement strategies in classrooms, and collaborate with teachers, parents, and other disciplines to support students in the special education and general education settings. Occupational therapists offer a unique lens to support academic performance. We are trained to assess motor function, executive function, visual motor skills, sensory processing differences, and more. Our involvement helps Wake County provide the best possible education to its students. Education is about empowering students to live their best life. Occupational therapists are trained to empower those who have unique needs and abilities. Occupational therapy is a second career for me. I started out in business, but my heart pulled me in a different direction. I graduated with a Master's of Science in Occupational Therapy in 2015 and worked in clinical settings prior to accepting position with Wake County Public Schools. Due to a technicality, I was credited with only 1 year of experience when I started with Wake County in 2021. My current salary is similar to my business salary almost 20 years ago. My school pay roughly equates to 35% less per hour than I made working as an OT in clinical settings. Due to another technicality, Wake County OTs do not earn as much or carry the same job classification status as colleagues with similar degree requirements. I feel like I belong in the schools. My best moments happen when I see that look of accomplishment or hear, "I did it." While my job is rewarding, I sometimes wonder if by staying, I'm allowing myself and my profession to be treated unfairly. I wonder if staying with Wake County is actually perpetuating the problem. For now, I've decided that I believe so much in the difference OTs make for our students that I'm going to stay and help be part of the change that needs to happen. I hope this information helps you to see the value of school-based occupational therapy and the importance of attracting and retaining quality occupational therapists in our school system. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kirsten Howe, followed by Margaret Watkins. Kirsten Howe, followed by Margaret Watkins.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Howe, and I'm a Meredith College student. I'm also a part of the Future Teachers program of Wake County. I've been in the Wake County school system since kindergarten, and I recently graduated from Fuquay-Varina High School in 2021. I'd like to start off by remembering the victims of the Nashville shooting. Mike Hill, 61. Catherine Kuhn, 60. Cynthia Peak, 61. Evelyn Dykos, 9. Hallie Scruggs, 9. And William Kinney, 9. I'm here to tell you that I am scared, sad, and even angry. I am scared for my future students. I am scared to walk into a school, and I'm scared to become a teacher. I am saddened by the fears teachers, students, staff, and I have to face every day, and I am sad for all the lives lost due to senseless violence. Most of all, I'm angry. I'm angry because I have to be here and beg for change because not enough is being done. Teachers are dying. Children are dying. Administration, even custodians, are dying. While children and teachers are being slaughtered at school, school boards and legislative bodies are focused on pronouns, banning books, and critical race theory. We have our priorities in the wrong place. I recognize and appreciate that you've called on lawmakers to ask for more safety funding and advocating for gun safety storage, but it is not enough. Schools around this country are paying for the consequences of inaction. Instead of focusing on what schools can do, we need to be focusing on what our government can do for us. But first, we need to recognize the true problem. Our problem in this country is our gun culture. This country has more guns than any other place in the world, and we have more guns than we do people. Increasingly around the country, gun restrictions have been on the decline. Just 2 weeks ago, North Carolina repealed the state's requirement that a person needs to obtain a permit from a local sheriff before buying a pistol. We are going backwards. I urge you to call on lawmakers in our state to pass common sense gun control laws and not turn our schools into militarized zones, mimicking a prison building more than it already has. This means an assault weapons ban, a buyback program, raising the minimum wage to buy semi-automatic weapons, banning high-capacity magazines, strengthening background checks, and gun licensing programs. All of these I just discussed are mentioned in Protecting Our Kids Act that I've provided you the summary with. A bill like this can be passed in our state legislature. I will leave you with this. As we know, military personnel get a Purple Heart if they are wounded or killed as a direct result of enemy action. If I happen to get wounded or killed by an enemy as a teacher, where's my Purple Heart? I will serve my children in keeping them safe in school as I'm a last resort in keeping them alive. Instead of an award for trying to protect my students, I would have my name plastered all over the news while NRA-backed politicians continue to send their thoughts and prayers while nothing changes and we wait for the next one to come along. Thank you.
speaker is Margaret Watkins, followed by Megan Kaufman. Margaret Watkins, followed by Megan Kaufman.
I actually came here today because I wasn't hearing back from staff about an idea that I had to help with these building new facilities. I actually heard back while I was sitting here that there was no mechanism for me to place donations that I get for the school system. So why don't you guys just create one? Why is it sort of just dropped? You know, you have a problem, you're not going to get anywhere with the General Assembly. The two parties, they can't get along long enough to accomplish anything. So I'm proposing a solution, and I just need you guys' help accomplishing that. I don't work for the school system. I'm just a parent. The other thing, all these people here work for the school system. I used to work in HR. Happy employees are just more productive, period. So if you guys can focus on safety, building those facilities, and keeping the employees happy, those should be your top 3 priorities. So, thank you.
Megan Kaufman, followed by Michelle Morrow.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Megan Kaufman, and I am an occupational therapist with the Wake County Public School System. I have always had a passion to help others, specifically others with special needs, from the time when my sister was born 3.5 months prematurely. I watched her participate and grow in various therapies, PT, OT, speech, vision. The list goes on, as well as within the public school system. I was always fascinated with the independence that she was able to find thanks to her, team of therapists, but specifically her occupational therapist. When doctors would place limits, therapists would bypass them. We aren't here to talk about my sister, though. We're here to talk about occupational therapy. I graduated with my undergraduate degree in special education from East Carolina, go Pirates, and continued on to get my master's in occupational therapy from the University of Alabama in Birmingham. I have since worked in the hospital setting, the private setting, and for the last 5 years, the school-based setting, where I found my home. I have worked with students from birth or 3 to 22 in the pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school setting. I previously worked with high school students on the occupational course of study track to assist with their independence in activities of daily living that would apply to their future career path. I currently work with students in the pre-K and elementary settings. At this point in the current school year, I have completed evaluations, attended 83 IEP meetings, and have a total of 79 students on my caseload. I see students directly in a one-on-one environment, as well as on a consultative basis in the classroom environment. I have worked with students on hand washing skills, using utensils to stab or scoop food independently at lunchtime, and how they hold their crayons or pencils. I have strategized with teachers, physical therapists, speech therapists, and the assistive technology team, to name a few, in order to promote independence with students. I have created and implemented sensory diets to assist with students' regulation in the classroom. It may look like trialing a Chewy, a vibration tool, a weighted blanket, a vest, or additional opportunities for specific movement breaks within their educational environment. I have created obstacle courses in the pre-K setting for students to work on a variety of sensory input, as well as balance, coordination, and strength necessary to play with their peers on the playground. I chose to work in the public school system because I find it to be the most natural environment for our students. Like many others, I don't work in the schools for the paycheck, although I couldn't live without it. I love what I do, and I love the people and the students that I work with. Like many others, I spend countless nights at home and money out of my own pocket to create fun activities for students. Like the teachers you provided with a raise, and the social workers and speech therapists included in that, occupational therapists and physical therapists do just as much for the students of this education system. I continue to stay because I have a dream that one day our profession will matter just as much in my heart, or on paper, as it does in my heart. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michelle Morrow, followed by John Amanchukwu.
Hey, I've been here many times, and I'm going to talk about some of the same things that I've talked about before. Our children are suffering. The mental health in this state specifically, we have tripled the number of suicides just in North Carolina among 10 to 18-year-olds. And when we want to talk about gun violence and we want to talk about the death, let me tell you, the number one thing that is causing deaths of our minors is auto accidents, and the second thing is suicide. We now have, for every suicide, there are 9 children that are put into the hospital for suicide attempts, and there are 47 that are there for self-harm. Let me tell you, mental health is a real issue, and us talking about it is not helping. What we need to do is protect our children's innocence. Let me explain something. First, something is hearable, it's thinkable. Then it's hearable, then it's watchable, then it's speakable, and then it's doable. And when Ms. Johnson-Hustler was talking about the sexual abuse of our children, it is happening in grave proportions, and it's happening in our schools. The statistics for 2019 to 2020, 60% of the sexual assaults that were actually reported were reported on elementary and middle school aged children. This is an atrocity. Right now, as we speak, there are over 240 teachers who still have their teaching license in North Carolina. It might be suspended, but they still have it on the books, and they have been accused or convicted of crimes against children. We have got to have background checks. We have got to stop erasing our children's innocence by talking about things that they are not able to handle. Let me explain something to you. There's a doctor named Dr. Judith Reisman. She has done decades of studies and put together studies from around the world that talk about what happens when you discuss sexual issues with children, whether it's in book form, whether it's in a video form, whether you talk about it. Let me tell you what happens to their brain. There's something called the frontal lobe, and it is well known that that frontal lobe is not developed until we're 25 or 26 years old. Do you know what pornography does to a young child's brain? It completely rewires it, and it makes them unable. You know what the frontal lobe is responsible for? It's for judgment. It's for social and for sexual behavior. It's also for understanding what the impact of a situation will be, a decision that you're making. And we are rewiring our children's brains when they are introduced, when they are talked about, when they are confronted with this adult issue. It changes their brain, it increases anxiety, increases depression, it is increasing the confusion of who they are as people. We've got to stop telling our children that they have a mental health disorder when they don't like their bodies, when they feel uncomfortable during puberty, when they don't like their voice change. That is natural, it is normal. We need to start telling our children that that is true. Stop making it normal to be abused. Stop making it normal to be sexually active in childhood. Stop making it normal for pedophiles to be attracted to children. This is wrong. It's happening in our schools. You just heard these books, and it's time for us to protect our kids.
Our next speaker is John Amanchukwu, followed by Julie Page.
Tonight I'm filled with righteous indignation. I want to define something for you tonight, the definition for pervert. It means to alter something from its original course, meaning, or state to a distortion or corruption of what was first intended. It means to lead someone away from what is considered right, natural, or acceptable. This book has been permitted in 6 schools in the Wake County Public School System. This book explicitly details anal sex, blowjob tips, a response to a letter about gay sex, and BDSM. I'll read just a little bit of this perversion that we have allowed in the school system. So he bends me over the bed and drizzles some lube on my ASS. I made him wear a condom, of course, and he starts pushing it in. And then we get to the blowjob tips. It says, use your lungs to suck, not your lips to pull. You're not trying to yank the D-I-C-K off with your mouth. You're trying to make it feel good. Use your tongue. Doesn't it make you cringe as I read that to you? I witnessed as each person came up and read different things from the books that's in the public school system here. You all cringe. You don't like it. You don't want to hear it aloud. You don't want anyone to read it. It makes you crawl in your skin. It's a dastardly deed. The question today is, who is the pervert that's allowing this to be purchased and delivered to our libraries? Come out from wherever you are. Who is the pervert that signs off on this filth? Who are you? You know, what do you stand for to accept this? Can you be in your right mind and be decent as a human to allow this to be at the access and the fingertips of children? Who is the pervert that thinks that this is okay? Who is the pervert that sits smug in the school board meeting while this takes place? Who is it? You don't have to answer that question. We know who the perverts are. There's one political party in this country that supports this junk. It's the Democrat Party. It's a party that castrates children, mutilates children, perverts children, grooms children, murders children, and indoctrinates children. We know who the perverts are. And NCAE, listen, you all have signed off on this, and it needs to be removed from every school.
Your time is up, sir. Our
Wake
next
County.
speaker is Julie Page. I will remind members of the audience to allow the person at the podium to speak. Thank you. Julie Page is our next speaker.
Oh, I don't want to follow that. Hey, y'all. Hard act to follow there. All right, on the agenda tonight is a revised board ethics policy. It says the board should remain nonpartisan, just as you were all elected. Each member should not subordinate the education of children to any partisan, principle, group, interest, or personal ambition. This would include the NCAE, of which only 4.5% of all employees are members. There are other things listed in the policy, but perhaps the most important one is the last. Your first and greatest concern must be the educational welfare of the students. With your oath to make a sound basic education a priority, you are required to ensure the following components are met according to the Leandro case from 1997. Ability to read, write, speak English, knowledge of math and physical science. Knowledge of geography, history, basic economic and political systems, academic and vocational skills to enable students to engage in post-secondary education, training, or gainful employment. Reading, writing, math, history, science, economics, not equity, not social emotional learning, not gender ideology. Equity is an absolute impossibility. It implies that everyone can have the same lifestyle and the same outcomes. That will never happen. We are all human. We are created by God. We are all different, but yet we are equal in His eyes. Equity actually forces unequal access to goods and services. Be leaders and promote actual equality so that no one has an unfair advantage. Social emotional learning in practice today is disguised as mental health with the actual goal of shifting the values, beliefs, attitudes, and worldviews of children. It manipulates children to accept a progressive ideology that supports gender fluidity, sexual preference, and systemic oppression. It leads to seeing the world through an equity lens. I will remind you here that this SEL is described here as a partisan doctrine and not compliant with your ethical duties. You also have the ethical duty to obey local, state, and federal laws in protecting children from sexually explicit content, obscenity, and vulgarity. Adult subject matter of any kind have no place in our public schools. Schools are not social justice centers. Schools are not health centers. Schools are not gender indoctrination centers. Schools are for academics, supplemented with arts and athletics. I will end with the request to dismantle the Office of Equity Affairs. Use the money from that ill-conceived effort to supplement teacher pay, classroom supplies, and for school security. Use it to fund students and not social programs.
This concludes public comment. At this time, I'll ask the superintendent to provide updates from our work session. Superintendent Moore?
So as has been my custom, I'll provide a couple of updates from the work session today where 2 items were covered. The first item covered in work session today was a review of the district grants process, presentation from the Office of Grants to provide information on how grants come to our attention, how we provide information to schools about those grants, how we support schools and district offices in writing grants, researching grants, applying for grants, and monitoring the implementation of grants that we do receive. We do provide a yearly update on our grants process that is provided to the board as well, so we wanted to provide this as, with the number of new board members that we have, is just sort of an understanding of how grants operate in the school system. The second item that was in the work session today was the update for the CIP 7-year plan presented by Facilities in collaboration and with the support of our county partners who help work on this. As you know, the 7-year plan really is about how we stage our school construction, school renovations, and other dollars that the public entrusts with us. The 7-year plan concept was designed to be fluid and flexible in its later years in order to make changes based on changing circumstances in our community. So the update that we brought today included an addition of 1 additional school that will be added, Cary High School, based on delaying the work for H15, which is not necessarily fully conceived or needed at this time. So Cary, which was our next school, will be moving up. And then there was also the addition of a couple of additional elementary or other schools potentially in the later years that could be scheduled for renovations or updates. Those are not named at this point because they're later on in the 7-year plan and provides continued options for the board to review as we get closer. That request will come formally to the board at a later meeting to vote on and approve. Those were the 2 items in the work session.
All right. We're now going to move on to another information item out of finance, and that is the presentation of the superintendent's proposed budget for 2023 and 2024. We will have time during work sessions and ways to communicate with staff. This is just the presentation of the budget, and we want to thank the superintendent and her team for putting this together for us. Or
Thank you. Good evening again. Dear school board members, I am pleased to share with you the Wake County Public School System Superintendent's proposed budget for 2023-24. The county appropriation for the operating budget for your consideration is $650 million, $694,842, which reflects an increase of $55.8 million, or 9% more than the appropriation we received in 22-23. As we finalize bold and ambitious goals and action steps for our 23 through 28 strategic plan, we must also ensure structures and resources are in place to support this critical work. That is why our proposed budget includes continued and significant investments to improve employee compensation, provide behavioral health support, and ensure our school facilities offer optimal environments for teaching and learning. This proposal also begins the work to transition more than $32 million of recurring budget priorities from one-time federal pandemic relief dollars to other permanent funding sources as available. Our efforts to shift these costs whenever possible will continue over the next 2 years. The federal funding has been key in our pandemic response and recovery efforts, but our students' needs extend beyond the availability of these federal dollars. Following are the key components of the proposed plan. Employee compensation. Our people are our greatest strength. For this reason, the largest line item in this budget proposal is $25.8 million to improve employee compensation. This item continues the multi-year plan to better align salaries with cost of living increases and market rates to strengthen our ability to recruit and retain the best talent. For non-certified personnel, we are proposing moving to a $17 an hour as a minimum wage pay rate or a minimum 4% increase, as well as increases to salary steps and grades to mitigate further compression. This proposal also includes a 4.5% increase in the local salary supplement for certified staff. With this recommendation, we'll reach a 10.5% total increase to the local supplement since 2018, when supplements were moved from a percentage to the base salaries to a flat rate. Next are legislative requirements. Per state law, an estimated $61 million of local funding in this proposal will go to charter schools in our county. This represents an increase of $3.9 million, or 7% of the total amount of local dollars that we provide to charter schools this past year, or current year, 22-23. This proposal also includes more than $5 million in local funding required to account for anticipated state legislated changes to retirement and hospitalization rates. Those are direct benefits to staff. When you add the $25.8 million in compensation and the $5.2 million in benefits, that investment in employee compensation and benefits is a total of $31 million of this request. Next is maintenance and operations standards. During recent years, building maintenance needs have been deferred to create and maintain funding, protect the funding for teachers and classrooms. This proposed budget transitions nearly $12 million from one-time federal funding to local funding to cover maintenance, utilities, and custodial contracts. This includes funds necessary to support necessary repairs and upgrades to our aging school facilities. It is also part of our multi-year plan to invest in preventative maintenance in our school buildings and to ensure optimal learning environments and to extend the lifespan of our existing facilities. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen more students in need of additional mental behavioral health support for their well-being. Yet our work to address this issue actually began in 2018 when Wake County Commissioners and our Board of Education asked staff to develop a multi-year plan to address the district's growing need for additional instructional support staff. In 2019, we launched a 5-year plan based on an acuity model to secure additional positions to support students' behavioral health. From 2020 to 23, we have used more than $11 million in one-time federal funding to accelerate the support of these positions. The 2023-24 budget proposal continues this multi-year plan and includes an additional $2 million request in local funding for additional school counselors. The next item is instructional support technicians. Our district gained an additional 135,000 laptops and 6,000 iPads during the pandemic. In the coming years, we expect to spend $22 to $25 million annually on devices and classroom technology and infrastructure. In 2019, we launched a multi-year plan to phase in again full-time instructional support technicians to help students and staff with technology needs. Since 2019, we have used a combination of local dollars and one-time federal funds to create 34 of our IST positions. The 23-24 budget transitions almost $1 million to cover 10 of these positions to move them from one-time federal funding to local funding. Next area is new, expanding, and special education programs. Again, expiring one-time federal funds will create an additional strain on our local dollars in the next year and years to follow. But we must still provide programs and resources to meet student and staff needs. This proposed budget includes requests for additional funds to support the following: a new early learning center to open in fall of 2023 to serve the increasing number of pre-K students with special needs. Additional school-based preschool education teachers and instructional assistant positions to support students with additional social, emotional, behavioral, and physical needs that we are required to serve. additional special education instructional assistants to serve in 10 new regional programs where we have significant growth, and offer other assignments and staff to serve students with disabilities. 2, employee support senior administrators to provide crisis and wellness support resources to staff. And finally, as we talk about achieving excellence and equity, our 23-28 strategic plan framework outlines priority areas of student knowledge and skills, student dispositions and well-being, and operational effectiveness. This budget proposal is closely aligned with these key priorities and will support the critical work happening under the essential pillars of a high-quality instructional core, equity-focused practices, high-quality staff, and family and community engagement. While this proposal outlines how we will fund district operations in the coming year, it also reflects the resources and structures that we need to be successful in our work in achieving excellence and equity as we move forward. Thank you for your time. I will ask David Nieder now to come provide specifics.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, and welcome, Mr. Nieder.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, and good evening, Chair Mahaffey, members of the board. Tonight, what we'd like to do is share information, and again, it's just for informational purposes. It's listed on your agenda as an information item. We're not asking the board to make any decisions about anything tonight. You'll have further opportunity to do that, and I'll discuss what that timeline looks like towards the end of the presentation. I want to start by providing, as we have in years past, with some background on the landscape that we developed this proposed budget within. And when I say landscape, perhaps more explicitly, the economic landscape. We also want to share with you potential risks that we see associated with the proposed budget. Again, taking a step back, a budget is, in a way, it's a forecast or a projection. We are forecasting or estimating what we believe the state legislature will do as far as making decisions associated with compensation of employees, associated with required employer contribution matching rates for both retirement and for health insurance. So anytime we're making estimates, there will be some risks with it. So we want to share some of those with you, give you a high-level review of, as you've already heard from Superintendent Moore, of the funding requests, and then go over with you a timeline from here through the rest of the process. So one might posit, why does the economic outlook really matter? We're talking about the school system's budget. Well, unlike the vast majority of states, I think all but 4 or 5 states in the United States, school boards have taxing authority. In North Carolina, school boards have no such authority. So for all intents and purposes, school boards in the state of North Carolina are reliant upon other governing bodies, in this case, our state legislature, our local government, Wake County, and then the federal government for provision of funding to support our operation. So in turn, as the economy changes, it impacts those different governing bodies' capacity to fund us. So keeping a bit of a radar on what the economy looks like, we think is a good thing. I'm going to just share a couple slides related to this. This is a slide showing the federal, state, and Wake County unemployment rates, which is always a good bellwether indicator of what the economy is doing. It starts over on the left, I think in mid-2018. You see very low unemployment numbers at both the national, state, and local level. You see that spike up in about a third of the way through the graph. That was the beginning of the pandemic, where unemployment rates shot up to about 15% at the national level. And then you see the quick recovery, now back down. And on the right, we're looking at a couple months ago, January of 2023. So that indicates a really strong economy. Some other things that indicate a strong economy is inflation. It's a double-edged sword. But inflation is one thing we look at. And then another thing we look at is, I guess, the brainchild of someone on the faculty at NC State University, Dr. Michael Walden, an economist. And he, for years, has been keeping what he calls the NCSU Index of North Carolina Leading Economic Indicators. And kind of what it is, it's a series of different indexes that he pulls together to get a sense of which way the economy appears to be going as we look into the future. And this is the first report where he has shown things look like they may be slowing down. And compared to May of 2022, his index of leading economic indicators is down 5%. So it's trending down. And what does that mean? The economy is going to trend down and likely slow down. So what does all that mean? Well, we all know that the Federal Reserve has been increasing interest rates and will likely continue to do that, albeit with a couple bank failures recently. They might slow that pace down a little bit. And they're doing that to get inflation under control. Most economists, including Dr. Walden, are forecasting a mild recession sometime between now and the end of the calendar year. So I think that's going to be on our radar in all likelihood. So the question marks we have is, what impact will that have on state revenues? We do know that the state has currently record surpluses. So assuming it's a mild recession, don't think it will be anything like what we experienced in 2008 or 2009, but we'll have to wait and see. And perhaps what might have a little bit more impact is on our local government. Our local government has two primary revenue sources. One are property taxes of property owners in Wake County, and the other is sales tax, the local portion that the county is allowed to charge. And purchases for services and goods, which are sales taxable, generally will slow down during recession, which means the county's potential revenue may slow down. So that's a little bit of what we're seeing. Jumping now to the state, this is a biennial budget year, so the first year of a two-year budget with the legislature being in a long session. The governor has released his proposed budget in mid-March. The end of March, the House released their proposed budget. And these links that you see in the PowerPoint slides, which are also in Assembly, they're hot links. They will take you to those documents. And we expect the Senate of the state legislature to release a budget in the coming weeks, if not sooner. And both the House and the Senate have said they do desire to have a budget in place, if not by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, shortly thereafter. I want to talk about some potential risks. I'm not going to go down every single item on this page, and there's some additional potential risks that are listed out along with background of what they are and why we think they're potential risks in the actual budget document. But I'll start with the charter schools, and Superintendent Moore spoke a little bit about this significant amount of funding that comes in from Wake County government to the Wake County public school system, and then turns right back around and goes out to the charter schools, almost 10%. So for every dollar that comes in from the county, almost 10% goes right back out, and it's not available for Wake County students. House Bill 219, which I believe Mr. Haggerty referred to, I believe in work session earlier today, includes some provisions that would seriously and aggressively change the funding availability to charter schools of the local revenues and other revenues that Wake County Public Schools and all the other school districts in the state of North Carolina receive. Similar legislation was proposed several years ago. It stalled. We don't know where it will go this session. And some of the provisions effectively would allow the charters to basically get what I'll call 2 bites at the same apple. When a dollar comes in to Wake County schools, the charters have access to their portion of it. But then they have other accesses for that same dollar, not a new dollar, but for that same dollar, they have other opportunities to bite at it as well. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it really makes it an uneven playing field. Child nutrition services, up until June of 2022, we had significant pandemic funding and essentially free meals for students during the pandemic. That ended on June 30 of 2022. However, some additional federal supplements were available to Wake County to supplement our child nutrition revenues and our support that are expiring on June 30 of this year. So we're going to have to very closely monitor what our revenue picture looks like for child nutrition. Our child nutrition operation is what's called an enterprise fund. So that means it has to be self-sufficient. The revenues it takes in for its charges for meals and a la carte items and the federal reimbursements it receives for free and reduced status students need to cover the expenditures within child revenue. I believe it's likely this spring, later this spring, Mr. Strickland and Senior Director of Child Nutrition Services, Paula DeLuca, may come before you requesting a modest meal price increase based upon increased costs. And it's kind of, I guess you could say it's a catch-22. We heard in public comment from so many different groups of employees about their compensation. And you heard from the superintendent, you're going to hear from me in a few minutes as well, of how much that is our primary focus. We've got to work on continuing to have competitive salaries to recruit and retain high-quality employees. But if you look at a child nutrition operation, there are 2 primary costs to it: food and labor. And if we want to pay these people more, and I think everyone does, that means the labor costs go up, which means that the revenues that have to cover those costs somehow have to go up. You heard from Superintendent Moore that we've got 2 years to address what we're calling a fiscal transition. It's not a surprise. We knew about this going into it. We made very conscious decisions during the pandemic to invest about $32 million of pandemic relief funds back into the district, knowing that before those funds expire, we would have to transition. You'll hear a little bit more about that, but we begin that process in the superintendent's proposed budget. There are risks with legislative impact. We do not know what the state legislature will say our new retirement contribution rates are. Currently, for every dollar we pay an employee, if they're a locally funded employee, we have to pay an additional 24.5 cents to the retirement system for that employee's retirement. Year over year, those rates go up. We don't know what the increase will be for this coming year. So we've estimated, we took a look back over the past 5 years and averaged the increases for both the retirement contribution rate and the health insurance rates and used that as an estimate. It's possible those costs will come in higher once they're finally legislated. So that's an adjustment we would have to make. You heard also from the superintendent about technology replenishment. It's one thing to replenish technology when you're at maybe a 3-to-1 device ratio, device per student. It's another thing when you're in a 1-to-1 density, which we have now become during the pandemic, and very necessarily so. The last thing I'll touch on, there's a significant utility rate increase before the State Utilities Commission. We're keeping our eye on that. Just to give you a sense, the district spends, somewhere between $35 and $40 million a year just on the utilities to keep our schools open. Electricity being the biggest one, gas, water, and sewer being some of the others. In the past, the State Utility Commission has generally not supported significant increases, and they've moderated it, so we'll keep our eyes on that as well. But that's a potential risk. So jumping into the superintendent's proposed budget, it is a $2.145 billion budget. You see the breakdown on this slide about the source of funding. Again, the majority of funding is still coming from the state at 54%. I do want to point out that the federal funding, which shows as 12%, is higher than historically normal. Normally, the federal portion of the budget is in the 8 to 9% range. The reason it is higher now is because of the significant influx that we've had over the past few years and into the coming year and a half of the federal pandemic relief funds. But you'll see that percentage shift back over the next couple of years. And then as far as where the funds go, 88% go directly to the schools in support of our instructional staff, our school support staff. Another 4% goes directly to transporting students to and from school, to the utilities that light and heat and cool the schools, to our child nutrition programs, and to the maintenance and operations that maintains our almost 200 facilities. 3% of the total budget, including all funding sources, goes on to charters, but because the way the state is structured, state and federal funding doesn't come to Wake County and then goes to charters. It comes to the Department of Public Instruction, and they distribute it directly to charters, whereas local funding comes directly to us, and then we're responsible for distributing it. So really, when you look at the charter pass-through in terms of local funding, because that's what it is, it's closer to 9, almost 10%. And then the remaining areas, which make up 5%, are the other internal central support areas that support our operation. Want to just continue to put in perspective as we compare per pupil funding in North Carolina, and in this case, looking at Wake County Public Schools, to some of our out-of-state comparisons. And when I say out-of-state comparisons, some of them are very similar in size as far as number of students, and or as far as what type of public K-12 system they are and what their offerings are. This data, while it is the most current data we have, does go back to 2019-20, but I think it gives stark comparison to see that per pupil funding of $9,610 for a Wake County student compared to even looking at a Gwinnett County, which is very similar in size. And it may not look like a lot, but it's a couple $1,000s more per student. But when you take a couple $1,000s more times 160,000 students, it's a big number. My math serves me correctly, it's almost $300 million in that one example. So back to the priority areas, and you heard from Superintendent Moore already as she shared her overall message, budget message. These have been and continue to be our priority multi-year focus areas. They began back in 2019-20. They remain a central focus, but now as we're managing through the fiscal transition, these multi-year initiatives are also competing for our need to migrate off the federal funds. But again, employee compensation, instructional support technicians to provide support to our schools that are now managing a 1-to-1 student device density, behavioral health supports for our students, and aligning our maintenance and operations formula with the national standards so we can make sure that our schools are maintained to the level that they need to be for our students, staff, and teachers to do what they need to in those buildings each and every day. I'm going to speak a little bit about the actual pandemic fiscal transition. You've heard the $32 million of things that we currently have assigned to it. They primarily come to current school-based behavioral support positions that we expanded during the pandemic, and we expanded it by being able to use the federal relief funds. School-based instructional technology support staff that we expanded during the pandemic, and we were able to do so by using these same federal pandemic relief funds. Improving the maintenance and operations funding formula, and we were able to do that again during the pandemic by utilizing and leveraging the federal pandemic relief funds, and building level substitutes is another example. So all told, we've got about $32 million of what we would like to be recurring expenditures on one-time funding. The superintendent's proposed budget, between the shifting of maintenance and operations, funding some of it from the federal funds to local funds, and then also the instructional support technology positions, some of them from the federal funds onto local funds, shifts $12.6 million of that fiscal transition away. So it still leaves about $18 million, $20 million that we have to address, but it's a significant first step. And just to give you a sense, we've received, since the onset of the pandemic, $475 million of different forms of relief funding. Our estimated spending of this through June, the end of this fiscal year, will be $379 million, leaving $96 million available for the 2023 year, and then some of it is still going to be available for the 2024-2025 year, not the complete year though. So priority area, and perhaps priority area number one, employee compensation. Public education is a human resource intensive business. 82% of our operating budget is to pay for salaries and benefits of staff. State funding of compensation increases, going back to the Great Recession and in all the incredible recovery years since, has not kept pace. And this crosses the boundaries of all of our staff. You heard from a lot of different staff today, all of our different categories of staff, including our school administrators, our teachers, our various support staff, including safety assistants, child nutrition workers, front office staff, instructional assistants. It crosses all boundaries. And the new employment market that we've seen post-pandemic continues to exacerbate our capacity to compete for high-quality students in recruiting and retaining. Just a couple quick graphs, and you saw these recently, I believe, at your joint meeting you had with the Board of Commissioners at the end of March, so I'm not going to go through these in detail. But this chart and the next chart still point out, and especially in certain categories of staff, we still have significant challenges as it relates to vacancy rates, with perhaps bus drivers standing out at the top like a sore thumb. But there are others as well. But then we have made progress in other areas, as we have been able to take the minimum hourly rate for our support staff from not that many years ago, from $11.80 an hour, first to 13, then to 15, and in the current year to 16, and in the superintendent's recommended budget, effective July 1, it would go to $17 an hour minimum. So the first chart I showed you was by type of position as a percent, and this lists it out as total number of positions. So coming back to the employee compensation, we've estimated that the state will on average legislate a 3% increase for all types of employees as far as their compensation. We know that the House proposal came in actually higher than that. It was over 4%. Don't know what the Senate proposal will be or the final state budget, But those are all things that we will have to reconcile on the other side of having a state budget and on the other side of knowing what the county appropriation will be for the coming year. As you've heard, the recommended budget includes a $17 per hour minimum and addresses compression by maintaining a step and grade differential. And as we went through the grades and the steps, it's $17 an hour or 4%, whichever is higher. We ensured that everyone would receive at least a 4% increase. In addition to the 3% estimated state legislative budget increase for teachers, the superintendent's recommendation includes a 4.5% increase to the certified staff salary supplement. And the recommended budget includes a 1.5% local increase beyond the 3% increase in our estimate for the state budget for our banded positions, school principals, SLT, and others, and that's to maintain distancing as we keep pushing that minimum hourly rate up, maintain or mitigate compression between the graded positions and the banded positions. We have a new sanctioned sport that we've now included in our extra duty schedule, women's wrestling coach, and we've made a tweak, and as we get into your work sessions, we can share a little bit more about what the increase in pay for using instructional assistants as substitutes are and the background for including that in the recommended proposed budget. So this chart is on the instructional support technicians, the second of the several multi-year priority areas, and it shows you at the bottom a history of the increases we were able to make starting back in 2019-20. And it shows back in 21-22 when we used that federal funding to continue to expand to the tune of 120 months of employment and about $870,000. And then it's showing proposed in the coming year removing that federal funding or removing those 120 positions from the federal funding and shifting them to local funding. I want to be clear that year over year with the superintendent's recommendation, the total number of IST positions will not increase. It will remain flat, but we'll be shifting them off that the funding that will expire and onto a recurring source. And just as I had on a previous slide, when we looked at the priorities, we also look at the fact that we've got to manage through the fiscal transition. We recognize that some things we're going to have to take a pause, but we do, as you see here, target continuing the expansion of these ISTs beginning in the take it back up again in the 2024-2025 year. Similar for the multi-year priority year for maintenance and operations, you can see in the 2021-2022 year, we put an additional net of about $10 million onto federal funding, and we pulled a couple $1 million off in the current year, and our proposal for the coming year in the recommended budget is to take the remaining $11.7 million off and shift it to local funding. So again, just as with the ISTs, I want to be clear, there's no year-over-year increase in the total amount of maintenance and operations funding, but a shifting, again, to manage the fiscal transition from the federal funding to local. And you see, again, it targets in 2024, 2025, continuing that multi-year increase to get us to a national standard. Behavioral support positions. These are our school counselors, psychologists, and social workers that work each and every day to support our students in the schools. The superintendent's proposal does request an additional $2 million in local funding for 250 additional months for counselors. So this is a year-over-year expansion. And I do want to point out this area is one of the major areas. If you go back and look back in history on 2021-22, you'll see we added $8 million of federal pandemic relief funds to expand these positions, and that will be part of the remaining fiscal transition we have to address after this coming year. Legislative impact, again, I've spoken about this a bit, and you've heard from the superintendent, but our estimated increase of pass-through of local funding to charter schools will be just under $4 million, and our estimated local increase for paying employer contribution rates for benefits is just over $5 million. New programs, very limited here. Our focus is on the priority areas and the fiscal transition, but we are opening an early learning center, and there are costs associated with that, as well as costs with staffing it. So those are the primary areas under new programs. I do want to point this out, and when you get to your books on page 26, you can take a look, and again, in your work session, we can drill down to this in a more granular manner. But we really did, I believe, as the superintendent's leadership team, some hard work to look at how we could take existing funding and repurpose it to meet some of our needs, as opposed to just saying we need more local funding. And that's what you see on these pages. And again, we'll have a chance to get into more granularity when we sit down in your work sessions. So, as you heard from the superintendent, the recommended budget includes a significant increase in requested county appropriation of $55.8 million. And again, the vast majority of that is in the area of employee compensation and related benefits. We, as we have in years past, used fund balance to balance this budget. And on the recommended budget, there is $25.2 million of fund balance used to balance the budget. And to put that in perspective, the unassigned fund balance as of June 30 of 2022 was $46.5 million. The board has a policy that directs it not to use more than 50% of a prior year's unassigned fund balance to invest back. Our recommendation is just over 50%. So if that remains in what will become the board's proposed budget, we will ask you to waive board policy. We've done that in the past at different times, so we'll see if we have to cross that threshold. And at this point, the actual budget document, which you have a hard copy of, should be posted on our website. Should also be in Assembly, as well as this presentation, as backup materials of the board meeting. And as we go through the different phases of the budget development process, and it passes from being the superintendent's proposed budget to being the board's proposed budget, and ultimately the board's adopted budget, each of those iterative documents will also be posted on our website. This is a look at the table of contents, and it starts out with budget at a glance. Some of the graphs I showed in some of these slides are included in there. Discussion about the priority areas that you've heard some, potential risks, information about our school membership and number of schools that we're operating. And then it gets into the different funding requests, first at a summary level and then a more granular and granular detailed level. Next slide is a timeline from today through towards the end of June. We're presenting the superintendent's proposed budget today. 2 weeks from today, the board will have a finance committee meeting. I spoke with the chair of that committee, Ms. Johnson-Hostler, yesterday, and we've tentatively agreed to hold a budget work session within the finance committee meeting, and then as needed, extend it into the actual board work session as well. The county manager, David Ellis, plans to make his recommended budget presentation to the county commissioners on May 1st. On May 2nd, the board will have another work session. This board will have another work session on its budget. And I will say it's not on this schedule, but based upon the discussion the board has, the questions they have, and any kind of direction that the board may give to the superintendent and staff to make changes or revisions to the proposed budget, I would offer up Chair Mahaffey and Vice Chair Haggerty that as needed, we could have another work session for the budget baked into this period of time, because then ultimately we do need to get to the county commissioners by May 15th, the Wake County Board's approved budget, and that's required by state statute. Then, as you can see, the commissioners have several work sessions, and then they're targeting to adopt the final budget in early June. And depending on where the state legislature is or is not, by the time the board will get to their second June meeting, I believe it's likely we will ask this board to adopt an interim budget at your second June meeting if we don't have a final state budget, which allows the board and the school district to continue to operate but not make any significant changes based upon changes reflected in the budget. And then it's a waiting game for the state to finish up their work, have a final state budget, and then for the superintendent to work with her staff and make recommendations of how to take what at that point will be the board's approved budget and make any recommended adjustments to align the board's approved budget with the final state budget and the final county appropriation. So, between now and your first work session on the 25th, as you're going through the budget document, as you're reviewing the presentation, we ask that as you have any questions about the budget, if you would direct them to Senior Director of Budget, Terry Kimsey. She will in turn keep them all intact, and she will coordinate with the different departments and areas within our district that have the subject matter experts to prepare responses to your questions. And we will present those formally at your work session. We'll also post those for the public to see, along with the budget documents on the website. And that can be an iterative process as well. And if you have multiple work sessions, there'll be multiple opportunities to have questions, because as you may redirect us to make some revisions, that may in turn generate some additional questions. So that concludes our presentation. It's for informational purposes only, but that being said, we'll be glad, and I've got Ms. Kimsey, Ms. Posey, and Dr. Matillo here. Be glad to answer any questions we could at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Nieder, and thank you, Superintendent Moore. I would like to thank Ms. Kimsey, Ms. Posey, Dr. Mutillo, our chiefs, and our SLT for the work that goes into this document. I don't know. I cannot imagine how difficult it is. But you bring something to us along with your work with our communications team that is legible, readable, and make it so that someone reading the document that doesn't have an iota of what goes into a school budget can at least understand the why to many, many things. And that is a huge testament, because that is a big translation from financial speak to layman's terms sometimes. So I really appreciate the work that you continue to do with this in order to make it more accessible to our public, because it should be. Are there questions, comments from board members at this time? Vice Chair Haggerty.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey. Thank you, Mr. Nieder. I really appreciate the presentation and everything that went into this year's superintendent's draft. The information's clear. It's easy to locate what we're looking for. I know everyone will have concerns about specific programs, and that's why we're going to bombard Ms. Kimsey with just wave after wave of email as we go into the work sessions and the finance work. But I had just two general questions. The first is that I know it's very difficult to predict what the legislature might and might not do. And of course, that's a huge driver for our budget. Looking at what you have in here, what you've projected under legislative impact, and what you've projected under legislative risks, what's the latest you think that you could adopt any potential changes to those estimates based on legislative changes before we had to approve a budget? Would we have an opportunity, if legislation passed between now and May 2nd, to recalculate that, or would we just go ahead with what we have and look for an adjustment?
Mr. Haggerty, great question. Not necessarily a straightforward answer, but I would like to think that if there is additional information or perhaps better estimates or revised estimates, that we would have some potential to let that influence the board's proposed budget.
Okay.
But regardless, as former board members know, and for those of you, this is your first cycle, this budget process is just a very dynamic, iterative process. And just because the state finalizes its budget and the county finalizes its budget and the board finally adopts a budget, doesn't mean that iterative process doesn't stop changing. Yeah. But, and it is possible, I guess to your point, that as staff, if we see something that we did not include in the superintendent's budget, in past years, it's not been every year, but occasionally we have come back as staff and the superintendent to make recommended changes back to the board beyond what was in the superintendent's budget that we would like you to consider to be included in the board's proposed budget.
Thank you. And then the second question isn't looking for a number, but just in terms of impact and things to be looking for. If the state were to, and we've seen proposals, if the state were to increase staff pay, what impact does that have on us locally beyond, does that have any benefit beyond our employer contribution to benefits and retirement? Or is that really the key expense that we would feel after a state increase?
Yeah, let me maybe tease that apart into a couple parts. And I think this past budget cycle gives a good example. But as far as the benefit, the two primary benefits we have to contribute as an employer are for health insurance for employees and for the retirement contribution. As a district, we only have to kick in those contributions for our locally funded employees using local funds, because for our state-funded employees, the state provides those benefits automatically. So we don't have to estimate or worry about what those increases are. If they go higher, the state continues to pick it up. So if the state comes in with higher contribution rates than our average estimates were, we'll have to identify some additional local funds coming from somewhere. But perhaps the second part of your question we experienced in the current year, where our estimate for increases that the state was going to fund, we underestimated. The state came in higher than we thought, which meant the state will pick up for state-funded employees more than we thought they would, which would free up some local funds. Or if the county does not provide the complete increase in county appropriation, could be used towards reconciling that gap.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Are there comments or questions for Mr. Nieder? All right. Can you restate, our next meeting is April 25th. We're going to have a finance committee. When would you like, and maybe this question is for you specifically, Ms. Kimsey, because I do know you take the time to prepare each and every question so that every board member can see what was asked and the answer to it. When do you need those questions by?
Why don't we do this? We're going to put an email reminder out.
Okay.
Either tonight or tomorrow to all the board members.
Perfect.
And we'll include that a target. But we do need a few days prior to the 25th to pull everything together, so, but we'll put that in the information.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Anything else? All right. Thank you, Mr. Nieder.
Thank you.
At this point, we will move on to the consent items. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, nay? Next up, out of Chief of Schools Department, we have the proposed calendar laws. First, we're going to see the instructional calendars for modified and year-round for 2024-25, followed by the proposed 2024-2025 instructional calendars for traditional calendar. Mr. Croza.
Good evening.
And thank
Staff
you,
is
Ms.
here.
Anderson-Powell, for being here.
Staff is here seeking approval for the 2024-25 instructional calendars. I'm joined by Ms. Tamani Anderson-Powell, who's our lead contact for Wake County Schools with regards to the calendars. The calendar committee, which is comprised of various Wake County staff as well as members of the community at large, provide input into these calendars that we've developed and shared with you today. Just a reminder, these were presented to you during the March 21st work session with some minor edits that I'll talk about in just a moment. First, we'd like to bring to you the year-round and modified calendars, and we're seeking a vote for their approval this evening. Staff is open to any questions or concerns you may have. We have not received any feedback from any of the board members regarding these calendars since the last time we presented.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to approve the 2024-2025 instructional calendars for modified and year-round? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, moving on to traditional calendar.
Thank you. So for traditional calendars, we have two calendars that we've presented to you during the work session, version 1.5 and a version 7.5, which was modified slightly based on feedback from a board member at that particular work session. Staff is recommending that you approve version 1.5. It follows the North Carolina calendar law. However, there is discussions about a potential change to the calendar law, and staff is asking that should that calendar law pass, that we revisit this calendar discussion at that time. However, staff's recommendation for right now for the 24-25 instructional calendar is version 1.5, and we're seeking your vote tonight.
All right, is there a motion to adopt a 2024-2025 traditional calendar?
So moved.
And what version is that?
The staff recommended version.
Okay, staff recommended version 1.5. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Edmonds and then Caulfield.
I just want to thank staff for drafting this for us so that we can see the version that, in my opinion, is much better suited for students. And as many in the public know, and as we know, aligns better with our community college system. So thank you for bringing that draft to us. Thank you.
Ms. Caulfield?
I have a question. You recommended that if the calendar law changes, that you would revisit it. Is that for the following year after?
So once the calendar law, well, if the calendar law is approved to be changed, we would like to bring back and revisit the discussion regarding 7.5, version 7.5, because we feel that with that flexibility, that will meet the requests from the public and staff regarding trying to create a first semester that ends prior to the winter break.
And just to clarify, what the request for this evening is for 24-25. So the request to revisit version 7.5 would be if the calendar law goes into effect and we have that flexibility to revisit 24-25. We are not looking at this point to revisit 23-24. It's too close for that, I think, in our opinion, but we'll do what the board asks us to do.
And are we going to engage the public to find out which version is more beneficial to them?
So we do have, as part of the calendar committee, we do have members of the community at large who were a part of that process. We can open it up where we'll have a work session again and then provide you with a 2-week window or a 3-week window, depending on the time frame, before a final vote, so you can collect information from the public. That's generally how that process goes. But we can certainly be open to anything that the board would like us to do.
So, Mr. Crozo, what I'm hearing is, should this legislation pass, then version 7 would be brought back to this board to amend this action today to adopt this version of the calendar, and then we would be able to have public input at that time.
We would bring it back
Yeah.
to see if you'd like to vote to change and not use version 1.5 at that point, but yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Yes, sir.
Just for clarification, and I know you've done a good job of presenting this, and the board has talked about this in work sessions, but I know sometimes we get a lot of conflicting information out there. I don't know how many of you were contacted by people that thought we were changing this year's school calendar. And there's some people that thought we've already made our summer vacations. Please don't change it. This is why we do this work so far in advance, because in addition to staffing and hiring and all of the school-based decisions, we know our community looks to our calendars and makes a lot of plans based on that. And, one thing that I would suggest is that if the calendar flexibility law does change, I think staff had specific direction about, let's see if there was a way that we could finish the first semester before winter break. But there might be other options that we'd like to consider, based on whatever flexibility we have. Is it just to look at having more schools on our modified calendars, which seem to work very well, which might not meet the same criteria, but could be like an alternative that some people would consider, or just a few other options. Maybe they want an early start, but maybe not quite as early. And getting that feedback, like Ms. Caulfield had said, I think would be really important. But then also looking at what the staff has done in looking at some of the other calendars our schools use. We don't have the opportunity to put a lot of schools onto the modified calendar anymore, only those that were put on the calendar before the law changed. And so I just want to keep all of our options open. And so if it comes back up, it's not, we'll have to accept 7.5, but that we could have the discussion and sort of vet the pros and cons.
Absolutely, but we'll deal with the hypotheticals we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Hershey.
Is this the first calendar that, tell me if I'm wrong, this is decoupling spring break from Easter effectively?
You're talking about version 7.5?
No, isn't it 1.5?
1.5, the recommended?
Yeah.
I believe it still keeps the traditional spring break as we have had it, that it couples with the, I think it's end of third quarter, and then usually that holiday that's on the Friday, Good Friday.
Okay.
Are we sure about that? Are we sure that was the intent? Because I'm looking at it as 1.5 is April 1st through 7th, and I don't think that's when Easter is. I think Easter is April 20th.
Are you on version 1.5?
1.5?
Yeah, it is. Easter Sunday is April 20th. It is why that year it is, and whenever the Easter holiday, which is a required holiday, is very late in the school year, you'll see our spring break is always earlier because we try to align the spring break as closely as possible also to the end of third quarter. And so in this particular case, in this year, the Easter break is very late, so the spring break is earlier, which is, you also see, because we're using 5 days for vacation as opposed to the 4 that we would be able to use if we were able to tag team Good Friday on as a holiday, and that leaves more vacation for other days. So,
Well, I personally love this. And I love it that it's at the beginning of April and not on Easter, because it is less expensive for our families and students to travel, quite frankly. So if this is something that we can do right after the end of third quarter going forward, I think that's great.
And I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Anderson-Powell for the work that she does on this and all of your questions and my misunderstanding of when the days are. It's very difficult, and she does a great job of putting this together, working with lots of groups. And there's a lot of conflicting personalities, and and I say that because it's me. But there's a lot of different thoughts of how we should do this, and so there's a lot of different permutations that can come out of it, and she does a great job with it, so thank you.
you notice there's a lot of numbers between 1.5 and 7.5.
Yes.
Correct, it is a very strange number.
Yes. And certainly, within the restrictions that we have from the General Assembly, that makes that process a little more difficult.
Correct.
And so, any further questions or comments Okay, seeing none, all in favor of adopting version 1.5 of the 2024-2025 traditional calendar, please say aye. Any opposed, nay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
We move on to an item off of the Chief of Staff office, and we will be discussing the upcoming visitor management system, and it is Mr. Russ Smith, our Senior Director for the Office of Security. Mr. Smith, thank you.
Good evening, Board Chair Mahaffey, Superintendent Moore, and Board of Education members. This evening, we're going to be providing you with information about a district initiative for visitor management systems and to request your approval to move forward with the solution. So tonight, what I want to do, though, I want to start with giving you a little bit of information about the visitor management system, just to define the need for a visitor management system, describe the proposed features that the system will have, and also to summarize the benefits of having a system in place. If you will recall, in a district-wide assessment completed by the School Safety Advocacy Council, there was a finding that the district does not employ a standard visitor management system for the schools and the buildings. School Safety Advocacy Council also went on to recommend implementing a single standardized visitor management system that will check all the visitors against the sex offender registry, that will also provide notification if an individual that has been trespassed or for some other reason is restricted from campus will also give us that notification. The system also standardizes what the visitor badges look like across the district so they're easily identifiable by staff, and also an added benefit would be to provide student tardy passes. So along with the visitor management system, we also have to standardize a policy, update policy, as well as to the RMP for visiting on campus. And by doing that, what we will do is better control the access control to the district schools and facilities, which in turn will enhance protection for the students and staff on the campus. So at this time, we bring to you a decision on a solution for a visitor management system. The services for this contract will provide a system-wide visitor management system as recommended by the School Safety Advocacy Council and in their assessments. So at this time, staff recommends contracting with BizTech Incorporated to provide Verkada visitor management software for 3 years. The total cost for the software is $532,000, which is $432,000 for the software and another $100,000 to implement the system across the district. At this time, board approval is requested.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the contract for the visitor management system?
So moved.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Ms. Edmonds and then Mr. Haggerty.
So are these going to be badges that students and visitors can lose?
So they can lose them. They are going to be stickers, just like most of you see at different places that do provide a system. But what we have now are 20-some-odd different systems.
But there won't be something issued like this?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then my second and last question is, are we going to get the same system here for this building?
Yes.
Thank you.
It'll be standardized through all administrative buildings as well as all schools. And but there won't be any, these won't be access. These are just identifications to note people that are visitors on campus. So when staff sees this particular badge, sticker badge, they'll realize that this is somebody that has been approved to be in the building.
All right. Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Smith. I wanted to go back to something that we had talked about in some previous discussions, but I just wanted to confirm. Will the district have the ability to enter additional data into the system. So for example, if we become aware of protective orders, against individuals that might be a threat to students or staff, they could be.
Yes, sir. That's a big part of this system and a big reason for why we need one centralized system. One is to be able to do, of course, the searches, in which that can be done with just about any system, but having the one standardized system that is networked across the entire county, we can input information such as what you're talking about, domestic orders, child custody orders, if somebody is trespassed, because they've assaulted a teacher or something of that nature, we can input that in the system and it'll alert us if they try to enter another campus.
Thank you.
Dr. Ng.
So can you clarify, in terms of the time, how fast is that database updated, and how frequently is it updated?
So for the sex offender registry, that's going to be a weekly thing, and then it'll be live time when we input information individually when it comes to trespassed individuals.
Ms. Caulfield.
Thank you. I was just curious because you said that this is like a sticker thing, and Ms. Edmonds had mentioned if it was lost. Is the student tardy pass and the adult visitor, is it identifiably different? Like as if a student just ripped their sticker off and somebody found it in the parking lot, could they just stick it back on, or is there a color difference?
It would be individual to the student, so it had the student's name on it.
But in appearance, it would be the same. Like just looking at it.
Appearance could look the same, yes, but it'd be up to any student that's in a hallway has a pass that allows them to go to class. It's up to staff to be able to observe the pass and be able to determine if somebody is supposed to be in the hallway.
Do you have a question? Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith, for this presentation. And I just have a quick question. All of our front staff will be trained on how to make sure that this system is working correctly, that folks visiting the schools will know how to use the system correctly. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct. I can give you a little bit more information about what it's going to look like.
Sure.
Okay. So these are going to be standardized, and we went through an extremely thorough process to go through to get to where we are here tonight. So this particular product is actually going to be, we will be purchasing iPads that are going to be in a case on a pedestal with rolling wheels. So it's going to be mobile. We can use it and move it to other locations. But the answer to your question specifically in reference to training is yes. That's part of the implementation fees. All staff members will be trained on it. And again, we are looking to have those in place for the year rounds prior to July 1, and I anticipate that we will have them all in place prior to July 1.
And hypothetically, if the system does not necessarily work, we will be able to have folks trained in-house versus going to an outside agency to wait for them to do not the trainings, if something was to happen.
Repairs.
Yes, thank you. I'm losing my words here.
Which was a huge piece about what we vetted when we went through this process. They will be providing support from another location. But we will have a system in place so that if there are issues that we can replace the iPad and we can do some things in-house to make the switch very quickly.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler?
And we may not know this question, but given we just heard Activate Good today, do you know if it's possible for this system, or do you know if it'll already be separate, that we're doing our background checks through another system? Or can we do all of our background checks for all of our volunteers through this system?
So,
to streamline the process for all schools.
So that is not, we have not gone in depth with HR. That falls under HR. We have had some conversations with them in reference to the policy and procedure, and they are involved in that process. And we anticipate, while we're doing this first, we want to make sure we get this off the ground. I think at some point in time, there can be some communication to see if there's an opportunity for us to address this. But for right now, this is mainly for our visitors.
I guess my question is, does the system do that? Do we know? Does it have an interface?
So I'm going to say that I think we need to check to see whether or not what this system checks for in visitor management does in fact align with what we check for in volunteer screening.
Well, so that's not what I mean. So when you do a volunteer screening, especially based on what your fields are, you design those. Right. I guess I'm asking, does this system have an interface?
Yeah, I don't think we know that.
Well,
that's a really good question.
Because I would choose a system
I think it's
that
a
has
great
an interface.
Yeah.
So it's streamlined eventually.
Right.
Doctor?
So yep, that's a good question.
Yes.
I think it's a great question. It's something that we can look at pursuing down the road to get the answers.
Right. Well, so that all of our systems sort of talk to each other.
Yes, that's
so
what
that we're not having either duplication of effort or disparate efforts.
Do you have another question, Ms. Johnson-Hausler? Okay. Dr. Ng?
Another question regarding, are you setting up some steps, protocol, policies in terms of what happens if the system is malfunctioning at any time during the school day?
Yes, sir. That'll be something that we'll look at. We're also putting together policy and procedure for when it alerts, things of that nature. All of that will be put into place before they are installed.
Ms. Waters?
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. Just trying to understand the logistics of how this works. So upon arrival, a visitor will still press a button to be buzzed in and then get into the school to then use the visitor management system tool. So will you have training or guidelines as to how or what reason someone is buzzed in? Is that a part of the process, or?
It's not exactly a part of this process, but it will be included in the RMP when we do put together the rules and procedures of when a visitor comes on campus. We also have some training actually that's going to be made available to office staff in May of this year that will address security issues for front office staff specific to that topic.
Thank you. And that question, and I don't know what someone sees on the other side of it, but I'm assuming when you buzz, there's a camera where they can see who's at the door. Has there been any sort of consideration of the quality of that? Is that a part of this process or is that separate and not a part of this process?
It is a separate, not a part of this process, and one for which I'm probably not going to comment any further.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, I have one question, and that is language access.
Pardon?
Language access for our families where English is not their first language. When you go in because your child was late to school and you have to fill out that form, is this accessible so that someone whose primary language is Spanish or Tagalog or something other than English, that they are able to see the information fields written out in their language, similar to when you go to an ATM and it gives you the instructions in your preferred language?
That's a great question, and I'm not going to stand up here and tell you because I don't know the answer to that.
I know.
I think I'm 99.9% sure, but I'm not 100% sure. So I can get you the information if it's incumbent upon that.
I know our front office staff does their best at translating for many of these systems, and I'd love to know if this is able to do it.
If you'll give me a
when you-
minute, I'm going to get you the answer.
I can wait on the, you can give me the answer later. That's, yeah. Are there any further questions for Mr. Smith? All right, at this time, we have a motion and a second to approve the new visitor management system. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed, nay? Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Prior to coming into this meeting, we did go into closed session during the work session. During that time, we did approve HR recommendations for administrative appointments and transfers. Is there a motion to approve HR recommendations for administrative appointments and transfers?
So moved.
And appointments.
Second.
You said appointments.
I said appointments.
It's not just administrators, it's all employment.
And yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Will all those in favor please say aye? Any opposed, nay? All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to go back into closed session for reasons previously stated.
So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor please say aye. Any opposed, nay? All right, we are now in closed session. Thank you.